Okay. We're firing up the engines. We got one turbine on with Twitch now streaming. We now have two turbines on with Instagram streaming. I'm getting pop-ups from Twitch on my phone like, hey, did you know you're live? Yeah, I know I'm live. Thanks. Figured that out. I'm the one who hit the button. Instagram is going to do its thing where it takes a couple minutes to invite all of you followers to the stream, let you know that I'm live. I guess Twitch is probably doing the same, although I have far, far more followers here on Instagram. So you guys spread the word, tell your friends, come in, hang out. We're going to be here for at least an hour. So it's going to be a fun session. We had a historic stream this morning. Absolutely historic. One of the best episodes we ever did. What's going on, 123? I'm glad to see you. Glad to see you. Several of you guys I talk with personally in my DMs and whatnot. We talk about the things that are difficult in your part of the world. I know I have a lot of people who don't live in America who follow me, but they're interested in preserving the Western civilization that we have built over the last 500 years. You don't have to be an American to care about the white race, because guess what? The white race didn't come from America. The white race came from the mixture of European countries who immigrated to America. So I got people all over the world who care about this, and that's a beautiful thing. And that's a matter of humanity. That's a basic human right to care about your people and preserving your people's culture, making sure your people don't go extinct. There's nothing dangerous, so there's nothing conspiratorial about the white community coming together and saying we have our own voice and we have our own interests the exact same way that the black community does, the same way the Hispanic community does, and Asians and Indians and Jews. So nothing controversial there, nothing that should get us banned or into hot water, I wouldn't think. But with that said, there's a few things I want to go over with this session. I want to pick back up where we left off on finishing the second 5 of the 10 Serene rights of manhood. You know, that's a post I published yesterday. I got a lot of praise, people sending me DMs and asking me to talk more about it and to go into more detail. So that's the point of me making the video this morning and this follow-up session that we're working on now. Sorry for the DMs and the notifications and whatnot, but hey, people love me. People love what we're doing here. So can't complain about people reaching out and wanting to help spread the word, being honestly just relieved that other people feel the same way they feel. Like that's the number one message I get in my DMs is thank you for saying something about this. And it's one of the two. It's either the attacks on Christianity or it's the attacks on white people. And people also appreciate the broader self-growth advice that we offer here, talking about health and fitness, prioritizing your physical health, your mental health, and your spiritual health, all of those together, creating you as a healthy man. So I'm very, very appreciative to have the platform here that is building pretty quickly upon itself. It's kind of snowballing. It's not out of control yet. It's nowhere near super viral or, it's not a major platform, but I mean, listen, we got a small army of 621 people following what we're doing. And you're all part of that. When you share my stories or my posts, you send them in your DMs to your friends, you tell them that this guy's talking live about the things you and I care about. That's where these followers come from. We haven't done any paid advertising on my account. Every follower that I have is the old-fashioned way, word of mouth. It's you guys doing your thing. I create the content. I put the stuff in my stories and record the videos, and I'm willing to put my face and name out here behind this message because I feel like it's that important, and I feel like I've been given many, many blessings in my life by God, not by other men, but by God, to be somebody who's in a position who can actually do something about this. And I hope that doesn't sound egotistical, but it is just the fact of my age. I've been around long enough to have seen where the Western civilization was in my younger years, and it is no longer there. So a lot of the younger generation, the Gen Z, and even the late stage millennials and Generation Alpha, who are now like 14 and below, they don't have a reference point. They don't know what the Western civilization used to look like. They didn't grow up with the world that didn't have internet, where the veil of corruption hadn't yet been revealed to everybody. And they didn't know that the level of crime and violence that they see in their cities now didn't used to be that way. And this is true across all of the majority white European countries. It's true in North America. It's true in Australia, New Zealand. You can go down the entire list. I feel like it gets a little repetitive to call them out, but it is a little bit like a roll call. And listen, it's fair to do because people want to know that somebody's speaking up for them. So the people in Germany, I know what you guys are going through. The fact that it's illegal to talk about the you know what, the fact that your native population of white Europeans, white Germans, is being overtaken by immigrants from third world countries. Everything I just said also applies to Sweden and Norway and Ireland, in the UK, in Spain, in France, as I said, in Australia, here in North America, in Canada. So that's the roll call. That's a partial roll call. But all you guys out there who are suffering from this demographic change and the falling away from Christianity, this is your safe space. This is where we come to talk about it. And it's kind of like we come to talk about how to talk about it. Because for the longest time, you just flat out couldn't talk about it. For the longest time, the second somebody spoke out on social media about the topic of white genocide, it was immediately flagged as conspiracy theory, white supremacist talk, and shut down the minute you even started talking about it, or even suggested that there was an issue. It was dismissed as a conspiracy theory, and if you push it, your account just gets banned. That's now changing, and we got to be grateful for that, and that's changing as a result of a lot of people simply not giving up. I mean, you look at somebody like Nick Fuentes, who's been trying to hammer home this exact message of the white race going out of existence. He's been trying to get the message out there for 7 years about this. And it's no coincidence that he is banned from every single mainstream social media platform and every mainstream payment processor. He's put on the federal no-fly list. They freeze his bank accounts. You know, we can go down the grievance trials of Nick Fuentes, but what we have found is, look at somebody like Jared Taylor, who is from a completely different age generation. I mean, this guy is, at this point, I think he's 70 years old. He's an author and journalist, and I put out a reel of his content yesterday, and it was a 10-year-old video talking about what's happening in America at that point in time and where America was headed if nobody steps in and fixes this. And so it was a 30-minute conference that he came to speak at, and it was called the History of Racial Relations in the United States, a brief history of U.S. racial relations. And this is on YouTube. And what's funny is if you go to YouTube and you just type in Jared Taylor, the same thing happens if you type in Nick Fuentes. The same thing happens if you type in any prominent name who has spoken out for white identity. The first 50 videos you'll get are white supremacist Jared Taylor or white supremacist neo-Nazi Nick Fuentes. The initial ammunition of slander and just flat out lies will be the first 50 results you see when you search for these people. And that's intentional. You guys need to understand that that's intentional. And a lot of guys who follow me, you know that that's intentional. You get it. You know that that's the algorithm intentionally elevating to the top of the search results how YouTube wants you to feel about that individual that you just searched for. That's what you're seeing. You're not seeing the most important aspects of that individual, what their political values are, what their religious values are. That's the information you're, like, seriously, when you Google somebody or you YouTube somebody or you Wikipedia somebody, you're expecting to see an objective report on their religious and political values and an objective summary of their education and of their background and their professional accomplishments. When you search for somebody, that's what we all think that we're receiving. And a very, very quick watch, just watch 30 minutes of America First, which is Nick Fuentes' podcast, which is banned on every platform except for Rumble. And even Rumble are giving him a hard time. These free speech platforms. He's still banned on Twitter. He's more banned than Alex Jones. And if you know who Alex Jones is, that says something. So the algorithm, so to speak, this is a good segue into one of the agenda things that I wanted to talk about. Before we go through the second 5, numbers 6 through 10 of the Serene Rights of Manhood, there were a couple of other newsworthy items that I just wanted to share. And if you're watching Twitch, you can see me pull them up on screen. If you're listening on Instagram, I'll try to describe as best as I can what we're looking at. You don't really need to see it in front of you because, I'll convey the information. You don't have to worry. Let's see. The first thing was I noticed a tweet thread was forwarded to me by a guy named Chief Trumpster, who is a activist of the America First movement. And let's pull it up on Twitter real quick here. When do you think they're going to change twitter.com to x.com? Is that in the works? I just don't see that playing out well because people already mentioned the xvideos.com problem, and many other websites that have an X in them naturally send viewers to an adult's kind of destination. If you know what I mean, wink, wink. So I don't know how that's going to work whenever the official rebranding of Twitter to X happens. Nick has talked about that. He speculated a little bit on his show about the X brand growing to be a multi-tiered service that just one of their offerings is this microblogging website called Twitter. That's one of their products. But they are soon going to have many other products that X offers. One of them is going to be a payment processing and potentially cryptocurrency kind of product. And so you and I will just have to wait and see what Twitter does, what Elon Musk does with Twitter and the larger X brand. But look at this. I pull up Twitter and the very first stupid freaking tweet I see is this PSYOP that's playing out right now. I didn't plan on talking about this, but I do want to make sure now that it's on my screen, you guys may have heard about it. I don't want you to think that what you're seeing here is what they're saying it is. So what they're saying happened is this like 65 or 70-year-old man who on his personal Facebook that is public under his actual name, it's not an anonymous account, he's a boomer. He posted several comments on Facebook over some period of time talking about how he would kill Joe Biden, how he's fantasizing about Joe Biden's bloody head on the sidewalk of a parking garage or something like that. And like they're tasteless posts. They're things I wouldn't put on my social media. I obviously don't advocate for violence, and especially if I had fantasies of violence, I wouldn't put them in public so that other people can hyperbolize them into saying this is an incitement of violence. That's just not smart. Even though it is free speech, even though it is constitutionally protected for you to just say things out loud, it's not wise. We all know that. So that's what this poor boomer did. This poor boomer doesn't know how the internet works. He doesn't know how the ADL censorship machine works, which is going to be the second story right after this that we talk about. That's why I pulled up Twitter, was to talk about the ADL. And there's a expose thread by Chief Trumpster talking about the history of the ADL, which is the Anti-Defamation League, and some of their conniving ways to control the internet and to basically shut down the movement of white identity as a concept, as a theory, as a public conversation. The ADL would prefer that white people do not see themselves as a collectively vested race. They want white people to see themselves as like this weird mishmash of, well, you have Italians and you have Germans and you have French people and you have some Ukrainians and you have Polish people. So How can you be one race if you're from all these different countries? It's like, have you looked at the continent of Africa? Is it not a bunch of different countries that, sure, so there might be some like cultural practices that are different from country to country, but there's no denying that they share a consistent ethnicity. So, and that's true when we look at Asia, and it's true when you look at India, and it's true when you talk about the history of the Jews. These things are consistent from generation to generation. They build on each other, and they don't particularly change. The cultural practices of Africans haven't changed. The cultural practices of Hispanic people and Southern America people, Central American people haven't changed. Cultural practices of Europeans haven't changed. So anyway, this 70-year-old boomer goes on Facebook and is just like blasting. I fantasize about seeing Joe Biden's head split open with a whatever grade ammunition, a 9mm, I can't remember, a 45 ACP. He said something like, when the police show up to my door, they're going to be greeted with the 45 ACP. And it's like, okay, well, you go, old boomer. Anyways, he didn't actually do anything. He lives in Utah. Apparently, Biden was scheduled to come to Utah. And so what the FBI did, they went to this guy's house, broke down the door, and killed him in a gunfight. Like, that's the facts of the case we know so far. It's unclear whether or not maybe he shot first, and so they had to shoot him. But my understanding is they knocked the door down with a battering ram. Okay, that's the FBI moving first. That's not a peaceful dispute. That's invading somebody's home. That's you making the first move. You can't blow somebody's door down and then say you're not entitled to defend yourself. So we don't know the full case, the case notes yet, but we do know that this guy is dead because the FBI showed up to his door and killed him. We know that much. And we also know that he hasn't himself committed any violence before this day. He's not committed any other felonies or any felonies in his entire life. He's a model citizen. There's pictures of him with his guns. Okay, and there's 400 million guns in America. There's like 150 million gun owners in America. So the fact that this guy lives in Utah, and because that's where the president was going to be traveling in the near future, that gave the FBI the entitlement to go and kill him preemptively so he doesn't do something. There's obviously stuff that's not adding up here. So I want you guys to be aware that whatever you're hearing in the news about this situation that the liberals are going to spin as this is us making sure we took care of some threat to the president before he could get to the president, like some kind of heroic tale of stopping an assassin. That's what the liberals are going to spin this as. But the thing is, an assassin actually has to go and try to kill somebody. And that's never happened in this person's past. And that wasn't happening today, yet they killed him today. So figure out what's happening here. We're going to stay tuned to that case, that story. I really do want to know. It sounds a lot like a Ruby Ridge kind of situation, which we won't go into the history of Ruby Ridge now because it's a whole side story, but it is, in summary, yet another occasion in U.S. history where the FBI and the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Organization, strolled up on a private family's residence and killed them. They killed the dog, they killed the son, they killed the mom, because these people were affiliated with a white supremacist group. That was their reason why they went and killed this family straight up. Like, that's why they did it. So that's the history of Ruby Ridge. There's much more to it. There's entire documentaries devoted to it if you want to watch it. It'll honestly piss you off to see how corrupt our own government is, and the fact that they see our own citizens who just don't want to be taxed to high heaven, and they don't want the government involved in their personal life to an invasive level. They don't want their government pushing homosexuality and transgenderism on their kids. They don't want the push of feminism, and they don't want the push of atheism on their children. So they move out to the middle of nowhere so they can just live a peaceful life of non-governmental intervention. And then the government follows them out to the middle of the woods and kills them. Like that's the history of Ruby Ridge. It's fucking insane. And so that's where my mind goes when I hear about the government showing up to this guy's doorstep in Utah, breaking his door down and killing him over Facebook posts that he made. Let that sink in. It's bad. Like, if you think our government is this like, oh, we're just here to protect everybody and keep the peace, you are stupid. You were born yesterday if that's what you think. So, popping open a beverage here. I got a Gatorade Zero Glacier Cherry flavor. Probably my favorite. Because we do have much to talk about, I actually packed 2 beverages. I have a cooler next to me with another cold beverage that I'll pull out as a backup if I need it. So we're on Twitter. We came to Twitter because we wanted to look at Mr. Chief Trumpster's thread on the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. I'm really looking forward to this because I haven't read through the thread yet myself. Chief Trumpster. Boom. So as mentioned, he is an America First activist, which means he's a follower of Nick Fuentes, which says, in other words, he is somebody who prioritizes the message of white identity and Christianity being the 2 shoulders that Western civilization stands on. So this is not quite where we're going yet, but he did post this also, which I found pretty amusing, which is just a meme reacting to the ADL's post. The ADL just posted this message 6 hours ago because yesterday there was a viral post trending on Twitter that was talking about how the Jews killed Jesus and the fact that the Jews were calling that a conspiracy theory and that that's not actually true. So they followed up with the second post today, they being the ADL, and that post says, the myth that Jews bear collective responsibility for murdering Jesus, also referred to as deicide, meaning the killing of a god, a deity, has been dismissed by historians and disavowed by Christian leaders. Yet the claim has been used to justify violence against Jews for centuries. And then the headline of the article they linked into the tweet says, Anti-Semitism uncovered. Myth, Jews killed Jesus. Okay, it's not a myth. It's not a myth at all. If you've read the Bible, the New Testament, it explains very clearly that the Pharisees, who are the elder leaders of the Jewish church, of the synagogue, and their Sanhedrin, which is the Jewish court of the synagogue, these individuals said that Jesus Christ and the things he was preaching were dangerous to society, dangerous to their own interest, because he was saying that they were all wrong, meaning people would stop giving money to the Jewish church, meaning people would stop giving authority to the Jewish church, the synagogue. They would lose their followers in modern nomenclature, but, they would lose people who were devoting themselves and their lives and their futures to the synagogue if they found out that the things they were preaching were not correct in terms of by God. How does God want people to live? How does God want people to interact with him? Jesus came to earth saying, I'm the Son of God. I'm here speaking for God. I am God in the flesh. That's what Jesus was saying. And he was saying all of these different rules, the Mishnah, the 600 different rules you guys have come up with, you Pharisees, in terms of how we're supposed to interpret God's 10 commandments that he originally handed down through Moses in the Old Testament, you guys have gone and created 600 different impossible to adhere to hoops to jump through, and you've implemented all these ceremonies and rituals that you think somehow bring you closer to God than people who don't do these ceremonies and rituals. And you're actively withholding a relationship with me from the people. You're saying people cannot have their prayers answered if they don't go through the Pharisees. Okay, that doesn't work. That's not what God wants. That's not how God wants people to interact with him. God wants to be fully 100% 24/7 available to every human being on earth. He loves all of us, and he loves all of us equally. There is no chosen race of God. In the Old Testament, the Jews being the chosen people who first initially received the Ten Commandments, that's all that's referring to. But the Jews are the same people who, after they received those direct communications from God and the prophets, the many other prophets after the Ten Commandments, the miracles that God enabled for them to be freed from slavery, they did not use those to the advantage of all humanity. They used them to the advantage of themselves and enriching themselves and elevating their perception of themselves as God's chosen people as more important, more valuable to God than other human beings. And so this is the point of suddenly I'm delivering the gospel. This always happens, but it's actually on target because we're talking about the ADL, who's a Jewish censorship thought police organization. So you have to understand, anytime somebody condemns or ridicules or criticizes the Jews, the ADL are the people who step in for them and say, you can't say that, that's anti-Semitic, that's hateful, you're going to make people respond violently towards Jewish people. But all we're talking about is the difference between your religion, Judaism, there being a God's chosen people, having the Mishnah of these 600 different rules, having all these ceremonies and rituals, all this other nonsense that God did not intend for his people, all of us. That's starkly different than the message of Christianity. And the Christianity religion is saying that anybody can participate. There is no racial or ethnical restriction. I heard that Jews have their own police force in New York. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, in Israel, there is what's called the IMF, which is the Israeli military force, which are known for tactics of blackmail and honeypot operations where they deceive people into incriminating situations, such as being found with hookers, putting child pornography onto people's computers, all of this kind of psychological warfare. There's the Mossad, which is their version of the CIA. It's Israel's version of the CIA is called the Mossad. And the Mossad were directly involved with the planning of 9/11. The pilots who were trained to crash the planes into the Twin Towers here in America, who were they trained by? Interesting, the Mossad. If you look up the dancing Israelis, there were these 5 Israeli agents living in America, in New York City, on the day of 9/11, who were caught photographing and videotaping their celebration of the airplanes hitting the Twin Towers. You can Google it. It's called the Dancing Israelis, and it's called that because they're on videotape dancing and celebrating and giving a thumbs up and taking pictures of the worst terrorist event in American history. And so 9/11 was a world-changing event, and the Israelis people, not all their people, but their governmental and military agencies were directly involved with the worst tragedy in American human history. Multiple Lebanese people saying that Al-Qaeda is Jewish-controlled force. There was a lot of deflection and psychological operations going on to try to, in the same way that ISIS was created to justify a continued military presence of America in the Middle East, the same thing is true for Al-Qaeda. So whether you're talking about military training or providing arms to them, etc., that's a very, very deep rabbit hole that I'm not even anywhere near an expert on. Like, there are people who have spent years researching the Middle East ties, who was set up to be the Ponzi versus who were the original puppeteers of what happened with 9/11, and then the next 20 years of wars in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and I think there's a couple others. Like, it's a long list. We stay fighting in Middle East, and okay, so we don't want to get completely derailed because we could talk about that too. Why have we been sucked into 20 years of fighting in the Middle East? What has that helped America? The normie take is that that's been it's been for the sake of oil, which is a great cover story to say that, oh, yeah, we're supposed to be making sure we're a dominant presence in the Middle East so that we can control favorable trade deals on oil in the Middle East. That's the cover story for why America needs to sacrifice 50,000 or more. I think it might even be 100,000 American lives so that we can have an influence on Middle Eastern oil production. That's not what's happening. That is not what's happening. What's happening is that Israel, the only Jewish country on the entire planet, cannot defend themselves from the hostile neighbors they have on all sides in the Middle East. They can't do it. They can't defend themselves against the Muslims by themselves because they're a very, very small minority in the world. I think there's 15 million Jewish people in the entire world out of, what is it, 8 billion, something like that. And all of them obviously aren't in Israel. But without military aid provided, even to this day, America provides $3 billion or more of military aid to Israel every single year. And that's just straight up checks we're giving them so they can buy tanks and guns and whatever. And it just gets worse and worse the more we talk about this, because that money that we give them as foreign aid, when we give foreign aid to other countries to help protect their borders, they are obligated by accepting that money to spend that money on United States manufactured arms and munition. They have to buy our tanks and our planes and our military gear. Whereas when we give that $3 billion to Israel, they have a unique agreement that is not like any other country, like Egypt or everybody else we give military aid for. They can use that money almost anywhere in any way they want. They do have to kick back like 20% of it or something like that on specifically United States made ammunition and whatnot. But they have the unique privilege of being able to use that money however they want. How can the insane Biden still be president? Dementia is a disease, but you can't be president. It's a shame. That's a comment we just got on Twitch. Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. Biden at this point is just a puppet. And he was a puppet at the beginning of his presidency. You got to remember, he didn't even run for president. He didn't run a presidential campaign. He did a few TV necessary showings, the bare minimum that he had to do. But for the most part, he ran from his basement. They kept him out of the public eye. And they basically ran on, he's not Trump. He didn't actually need to show up and do any really good debates or have very moving and compelling speeches for the whole United States to listen to and hear. His success formula was it was a two-part equation. One was bank on people disliking Trump, and two was flat out steal the election, utilize election fraud. And so it's controversial. Some people say that election fraud didn't happen. Some people say that it did. I'm obviously of the latter. I do think that there is more than enough bullet points of questionable empirical evidence, meaning things you can measure with numbers, such as the mail-in ballots from 2016. Only 35% of the country voted using mail-in ballots, and then suddenly it doubles to 70% in 2020. And they say that the reason they had to do that was because of COVID. Well, now you can start talking about, well, we know that COVID was an intentionally released human-made virus. Right before the 2020 election, that way everybody can vote for home. That way we can send out proactively mail-in ballots to 70% of all of the eventual voters coming in through mail, twice as many as the previous election. And mail-in ballots are not governed with the same level of chain of custody as showing up in person and casting a ballot in front of a person, showing them your ID. One vote per one person, whereas mail-in ballots, you could have a single person showing up to a drop box and dropping off 20 ballots. So the whole mail-in ballot thing really undermined the credibility of the 2020 election. So the fact that Biden has dementia, it's kind of like, yeah, that doesn't even really change anything, because he wasn't lucid and well-spoken in the last election, and he still won. So 1, 2, 3, I'll give you a quick shout out because I see that you want to mention Kosovo, which is a region in my country under control of terrorists, which were supported by NATO and Israel. Jews do slave, drug, and weapons trafficking to all of Europe through that place. Interesting, man. I don't know anything about Kosovo, so I can't comment there, but hey, I got friends all over, and it's cool because they see things that are happening in their country that I would not possibly be exposed to. There's no way to stay abreast of all of the international news happening every day. Like, I'm a part of several international Telegram groups, counterintelligence, global counterintelligence kind of things. And I still just can't keep up with that many headlines. There's too much going on. Like, we haven't even talked about the South African coup, the most recent South African coup. They seem to have one about once a year. But the fact that South Africa is now looking at a potentially multi-country conflict, military conflict, and you have Russia getting involved, allegedly helping them institute this coup, and now you're going to have the United Nations countries getting roped in to take a side, basically, on who you're going to support, the Russian-backed coup or the native Niger government. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I'm still learning about it. If I have more to say about it eventually, then we'll talk about it. But for now, to stay on topic, even though we got distracted for 20 minutes, I was delivering the gospel about Jesus Christ and the Pharisees. Now we're talking about international military policy and the Mossad and the IMF and 9/11. You kind of get that with this show. There's just always rabbit holes left and right that we end up going down and losing the plot a little bit. But back to this ADL thread that we were looking at, because you mentioned, or this article mentioned, how it's a conspiracy theory that the Jews had Jesus killed. So the way they justify calling this a conspiracy theory is that technically the Roman government are the people who arrested Jesus, and technically the Roman government are the people who ordered his crucifixion. Pontius Pilate, the governor of Jerusalem, where he died at the time, was like I said, a Roman government official who authorized the crucifixion. But if you actually read the Testament, Pontius talks, and he says how he comes to the decision of going through with the crucifixion. He asks the public, meaning he's standing there with Jesus, with the Jewish Pharisees, in front of a mob of people, and there's actually 3 different criminals that are up for execution that day. I think the guy's name is Barnabas the thief or something like that. And Jesus is one of them, and there's another one. And he asked the people, who should we execute here? And so the Pharisees are sitting amongst the crowd saying, Jesus, he's a danger. He's going to incite riots. And so the mob, being a sheep-like mob, echo the same thing the Pharisees are saying. And so Pontius Pilate, the governor, the Roman governor, says, what crime has this man committed against you guys that justifies us crucifying him? He asked the crowd that. What does the crowd say? Crucify him. What does the Roman government official Pontius Pilate say? Guys, I heard you say crucify him, but I'm asking you, why do you want us to crucify him? What does the mob say? Crucify him or else we will. So if you're trying to figure out, is this a fair trial? Is there evidence that this individual who has the death penalty being alleged or being charged against him, what did he actually do to deserve dying? They don't have an answer. And the Jewish Pharisees knew that. There was no crime committed. He was not a violent person. He didn't steal anything. He didn't slander anybody. Everything he said was factually true. If anything, people saw him perform miracles. They saw him heal people. They saw him deliver motivating speeches about God and God's love and about the importance of forgiveness. That's what people knew about Jesus, and they're saying he needs to die. So they used that loophole of saying it was actually the Roman government who ordered his execution. But what Pontius said, to wrap this part of it up, was that I have heard you, mob, now twice say you want this man as dead, but you have not been able to provide me any evidence or reason to authorize this. So in order to avoid a riot, I am washing my hands of this matter. If this man is to die, then the blood of this man is on your hands. Your as in the mob and the Pharisees. And so it was one of those everybody's passing the buck situations where the manager says, well, hey, I was just listening to my employee. And the employee says, hey, I was just listening to my manager. And so nobody takes accountability of the fact that this innocent man who hurt nobody, who told no lies, was just given the death sentence. This is the Jews don't want to have this conversation. They're not going to have this. When you read their stupid ADL conspiracy theory that we had Jesus killed, they're going to give you that high level, well, technically the order to crucify Jesus came from Pontius Pilate, who was a Roman governor. It's like, it's so disingenuous. And you see this every time they criticize somebody who speaks out against these Jewish deceptions. So I thought that was funny that I just went to go check the thread. So not that post, but this thread we're about to go over. And sure enough, the ADL is posting at the same time that this thread is popping off. They're posting, hey, everybody, it's a conspiracy theory that we had Jesus killed. That's anti-Semitic to even say that. Nothing is too shameful for these people. I swear, it's crazy. But the dam is breaking. If you saw some of the stories I posted today, the fact that this Twitter thread is still on Twitter and it hasn't been banned yet by Elon Musk is a very, very positive development. The fact that anti-Semitism, which is just, in other words, being critical of Jewish culture or Jewish religion, has now become more tolerated on Twitter and other social media platforms, is a very, very positive sign, because that means if the veil of censorship breaks and the truth comes out about the amount of manipulation of the media and of history, world-changing history, world-changing lies and misconceptions that were perpetuated over generations about the history of World War II, about the history of Jews and Christians, about the history of Europe as it relates to the white race. If the truth gets out about those subjects, it's over. It's over. Like the whole musical chairs of what person can we put in charge next who has it turns out, they don't have a Jewish last name, so surely they can't be involved. But you figure out that they were granted that position by the previous Jew who was in charge. Or, in fact, they changed their name to a Anglo-Saxon last name, Smith, or something like that. People are noticing. It's what's called the Great Noticing. I think I put that in my stories today. The Great Noticing is, why is it everywhere we look, when we're trying to figure out the root of these social contagions and the societal collapse that we're experiencing in all the Western white countries, why do we continue to find people who are ethnically or religiously Jewish behind them? The entire homosexuality and transgender movement, 100% by Magnus Hirschfeld and George Money. Look them both up. They're both Jewish authors. They're both Jewish, what do they say, sexologists, people who have devoted their lives to basically trying to establish legitimacy of anything other than biblical sexual morals. They want to say that there is nothing morally wrong with other options than man marrying a woman, having children, and that's the purpose of sexual, this is the biological purpose of having sex in life. It's also purposefully there in a marriage to create a bond between the husband and wife. But all of these things are unique to husbands and wives, men and women. They don't exist whatsoever for men and other men or for women and other women. And the fact that there are only two genders is a uniquely Christian view. When you look in the Talmud, the Jewish Talmud, it talks about how there's like 6 to 8 different genders. So it's a fundamentally different worldview when you're talking about having Christian leaders versus having Jewish leaders. And so the great noticing is people becoming aware of that. Because up until now, people would say, okay, even if it were true that Jewish people run the media and run the news and run the banking industry and run the pornography industry and run higher education and are installed at the highest levels of government. Okay, so what if all that's true? What does it even matter? They're just really hardworking and really intelligent and really enterprising, and they're really good at networking. That's why they show up with the 50% representation in all of those institutions, despite only being 2% of America. It's just purely a result of their hard work and intelligence that they're represented that heavily in all of the most influential institutions in America, that disproportionately. It's comical. Like when you say it out loud, it's genuinely comical that they have gotten away with using that as an explanation for how they show up in society as a group. And so it's becoming more normalized to talk about this, and if that's a good or bad thing. And so that conversation of, is this a good or bad thing? You have to get into the details of their religion and of the Talmud and of their cultural practices and of their history. And that's all a public conversation that has to be had. And you can't have a public conversation if everything you say about Jewish people and being critical of them is deemed anti-Semitism and a hate crime and inciting violence. And that is precisely what the Anti-Defamation League was created to do. The Anti-Defamation League is a Jewish founded and currently Jewish run. It is a Jewish organization. It's not like a agnostic, anybody, we speak up for any and everybody's human rights and everybody's right to free speech. It's not about like preserving the Constitution. It's not an American institution. It is a Jewish institution. If you look at the founding of it, I forget the guy's name. We can quickly figure it out if we really wanted to. But the ADL came together as an activist group to begin with to defend a Jew who was accused of raping, I believe, a white woman, and was eventually found guilty of raping that woman. So like this is the history of the organization who controls speech on the internet. Leo Frank, thanks JV for dropping that in there. You guys, 123 JV, you are my homies, man. You guys have really been making me feel positive about the young people receiving this message, supporting it, and seeing it as honestly the most important things that there are to talk about. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that if we get to it as an agenda item after we go through this thread, after we talk about the second 5 rights of manhood. I want to talk a bit more about some of the opportunities for me to get you guys' help with broadening this platform, because there's some opportunities there where you can use your voice. And even if you don't want to attach your identity to it, you don't want people drawing attention to you and being associated with some of these messages, you can help out anonymously. So I'll hit you up, guy, about that. And I'll actually read through a little bit. I've been putting my thoughts down on trying to create some internships for Beholden to Truth. And I think there's a lot of good work that you guys and others could do to help us out, to help our people out, to help white people, to help Christians out. Flyer dropping is solid. Yeah, absolutely. So if I get to it, that's not the most important priority tonight, but I was thinking about that earlier this afternoon. It's like, man, I really do need some help in social media management and content creation, stuff like that. So maybe we'll talk more about that. 123 says there was a case of Jewish man kidnapping American girl, raping her, and sacrificing her. He was president of some rich company. So that's another thing that Jews call a conspiracy theory, is blood libel, where they talk about this is a historical practice. There are lots of books about this, about Jews kidnapping Christian children, not just any children, but specifically Christian children, and sacrificing them, draining their blood, using their blood in Kabbalistic rituals. The Kabbalah is Kabbalah, I think, is the third set of religious texts that the Jews have. They have the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Then they also have the Talmud, which is the oral law passed down through the rabbis. And then the third book they have is the Kabbalah, which is the mystical practices of Judaism. And I mean, that's straight up talking about pagan satanic rituals where you're collecting the blood and performing sacrifices. Like, this is old-fashioned pre-Bible age mysticism going on in today. Like Madonna, for example, called herself a Kabbalist. So it's not like this stuff just went away. It doesn't happen anymore. This stuff is still actively practiced today by influential celebrities. So anyway, let's actually finally get into what this thread has to say. I'm going to bookmark it right now, and hopefully somebody else capped it and threaded it. That way it doesn't get censored and disappeared from the internet, because that kind of thing tends to happen with these threads that are highly organized. They provide the sources, and yet somehow they get censored anyway. So let's read through this. I'm going to take a sip of my Gatorade here. I hope you guys have a beverage. You got to have something by your side, especially if you do intermittent fasting like I do. I don't have a single calorie until 7 p.m. at night every day. I don't eat a single piece of food. All I have are 0-calorie beverages throughout the entire day. And this is what tides me over until the evening when I blow out the daily budget of food. I have an enormous pan of like cheese fry nachos, or a pizza, or a hamburger and fries, or whatever. And then I follow that up with a whole platter of different protein desserts, like different types of protein bars, protein brownies, protein Rice Krispie treats, protein cookies. So it's a pretty great life, I gotta say. I eat very, very well, but I eat a precise amount of calories every day, and I eat a precise amount of protein every day. So even though you hear me saying pizza, nachos, hamburgers, French fries, chocolate, all that's true. Like, that is the stuff I'm eating, but I know exactly how many calories are in that pizza and in those nachos and in the French fries, etc. You get it. So let's do this. Let's look at this thread. The dark history of the ADL and how they control big tech. Here we go. This thread gives an overview of the ADL, the disturbing pattern of suppressing speech, and the pressure campaign to force Elon Musk and Twitter to ban individuals and entire organizations. Will Elon push back on this attack on speech? The ADL exposed. You guys like my dramatic reading of this? This is good. All right. The ADL was founded in 1913 in defense of Leon Frank, a Jewish businessman convicted of the rape and murder of 13-year-old female Mary Fagan. He was sentenced to death. The ADL blames this on anti-Semitism, despite 5 jurors being Jewish. And they provide the source here, which is a source from Ron Unz. If you guys have never heard from Ron Unz, you need to go to this website, unz.com, unz.com. He publishes what's, I believe, called the Unz Report, and he has the best, the most thorough historical documentation with every single source provided, every I dotted, every T crossed in regards to the Jewish question. And I mean for all of history. I don't mean just going back to World War II. I mean going back to Old Testament times, to biblical times, and how the Judeans are different than the Khazarian Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews. He has that entire history, which is important to understand, because one of the deflections that the ADL and Jewish people like to use is when we're talking about Zionists and the people who created Israel, those are not the same Jews as the biblical Jews in the Old Testament. And they try to put themselves in the same category as those Jews. The Ashkenazi Jews of today and the Zionist Jews of today try to put themselves in the same category and ask for the same protections based on being in that category of Judaist Jews. Yeah, JV says, very wisely so, we can't truly talk about the Jews if we don't know them properly. So you can either go to BitChute or you can go to Rumble, and you can look up the documentary series Europa, The Last Battle. You can look up Judea Declares War on Germany. And there's several other great documentaries out there about the history of the Jews. And oons.com, if you're more of a reader rather than a viewer, a video kind of person, and you actually want to verify that all the sources are there for these claims and whatnot, that is your go-to shop, oons.com. So this next tweet says, Oons elaborates on the facts. Frank's black janitor confessed to being Frank's accomplice and maintained his story during 16 hours of cross-examination. So there is a witness here, not just a witness, but a co-accomplice to the rape. Former female employees reported his long history of sexually aggressive behavior toward them and Mary. So you have reports from other employees of the poor woman who was raped. The ADL lobbied and fought for appeals many times and failed. As the hanging drew near, Georgia's outgoing governor commuted Frank's sentence to life in prison, angering locals who then stormed the jail and hung Frank. Why does the ADL defend Frank? And it's got the emoji. It's got the thinking emoji. Yeah, The Greatest Story Never Told is another great documentary as well. I can't stand what they've done to Germany as a country. It's just so evil. So the ADL maintains their defense of Frank despite the facts. The ADL in modern times has transformed into a global organization that coordinates with big tech to control speech and the flow of information. And here we have a video of Jonathan Greenblatt, who runs the ADL, who is in this clip with MSNBC speaking to the news correspondent about how he works directly with Elon Musk and the other social media platform owners to, quote, tackle hate speech. What is hate speech? Hate speech is anything critical of Jewish people. The ADL goes far beyond pushing big tech to ban speech. They organize and lobby corporations through partnerships to boycott companies that don't meet their demands. Just last year, the ADL called for Twitter to boycott over spikes in content, toxic content. And so here's a link to the boycott, similar to the 1933 boycott of the international Jewish community boycotting German goods, if you guys remember that from your Europa history. Well, here we have them again, coming against a international force that controls the public narrative and perception of people, organizing a boycott against them. So this time it's not a nation, it's not Germany, it's the international organization that is Twitter, who controls the international news cycle. You have the ADL organizing a boycott of Twitter. And how do they do this? The ADL has a $500 million endowment, meaning they have $500 million worth of donations they receive from all the different Jewish billionaires that are out there, of which there are many, of which there are a disproportionate representation, to put it one way. It's certainly if you look at all billionaires, are Jewish people 2% of them? Yeah, I don't think so. But they're just really good with money, right? That's all that means. So they use that $500 million war chest to hire the top tier lobbyists and influencers and run these hit campaigns with people like Media Matters and the Southern Poverty Justice League, or whatever the fuck they're called, the SPLC, and other thought police organizations. They push the $10,000 checks to these people, the $100,000 checks to these people, and say, we need you to mass report such and such on Twitter right now because he's saying things that are critical of the Jews. And in this particular boycott, I'm not sure if he's going to provide the details here. It doesn't look like he does. I'll do a quick recap of this Stop Hate for Profit boycott against Twitter. The ADL published a letter on Twitter and elsewhere, maybe even been like front page of the LA Times or something like that, which, by the way, you have to spend marketing dollars on. That's where that $500 million gets used. They put a front page ad. They did this to Facebook 2 years ago also, by the way. But, just last year, they did this to Twitter, saying, hey, all of you advertisers who advertise on Twitter. So I'm talking to you, McDonald's, I'm talking to you, Adidas, I'm talking to you, Ford Motor Company, Target, all of those marketers, all those companies who market their products and their services on Twitter. If you guys don't pull your ads from Twitter, then we're going to say that you are complicit in keeping Twitter in business so that they can be anti-Semitic and hurtful to the Jewish people. You are a partner in crime with Twitter in hurting the Jewish people if you advertise on Twitter. That's the public boycott that they organized last year to get Twitter to further censor people who were being critical of the Jews on their platform. And as I said, they did the exact same thing to Facebook 2 years before. And this is just what they do. You'll see this over and over again. We saw them retaliate against Kanye West when he, as a famous, influential person, came out and said, hey, the Jewish people do some really bad things in the recording industry. The way they treat their talent, the way they do these contracts, it's not right. It's not humane. Well, we all know what happened to Kanye. He lost $1.5 billion worth of wealth because he criticized the Jews. And so it's like when you talk about the string of events that you can just observe, if you watch the news long enough, if you watch Twitter long enough, just watch for 6 months and you will see this happen over and over again. So, this happened this week with Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx posts something talking about Jesus and how the Jews killed Jesus and how Judas, being a Jew, betrayed Jesus and got him killed. Well, how did the ADL respond? They responded by calling Jamie Foxx an anti-Semite. And the entire Jewish community on Twitter said Jamie Foxx is an anti-Semite because he said, this is kind of what sparked the whole Jews killed Jesus thing. It's because Jamie Foxx posted a meme saying something about being betrayed and Judas and Jews killed Jesus. And so he got slammed by the Jewish community. Jamie Foxx, you know who he is. He is a international celebrity. He's been in Hollywood for 30 plus years making blockbuster movies. They can't have him being anti-Semitic in public in the same way they couldn't have Kanye West being anti-Semitic in public. In the same way they came after Chappelle when he did his comedy special and talked about how you can't talk about the Jews. In the same way they came after Kyrie Irving and got him suspended from the NBA because he tweeted a link to a documentary about the history of Black people and how the Jews were the owners of almost all of the slave ships in the North American slave trade. Didn't even comment about it. All he did was tweeted out a link, and the guy got suspended from the NBA. And they actually have the audacity to sit there and say, we don't abuse our power or our positions and our connections with big tech and censorship. We don't abuse that. What are you talking about? Oy vey is all I have to say when it comes to pattern recognition. You guys get it. I'm sure you see this. Like, even if you're hearing all this stuff for the first time, you should be able to nod and agree and say, that is kind of suspicious. Yeah, Jamie Foxx, Kyrie Irving, Dave Chappelle, Kanye. What do all these people have in common? They're Black people who criticize Jews. What does Jared Taylor and Nick Fuentes and anybody else who speaks up about white identity, the white race needing to be protected, but not the Jewish race, what do they all have in common? They criticize Jews and their forced multiculturalism that they bring and invite into every country that they go. This is the playbook for the Jewish culture. It is to go and live in a nation and use their influence to persuade government, to persuade the business sector, to manipulate the education of that nation into being celebratory of Jewish culture and Jewish people and developing negative views of the native people. encouraging diversity, encouraging multiculturalism, and destroying the nation that they have moved into, that they have essentially attached themselves like a parasite onto, and extract the wealth, extract the productivity, extract all the benefits of living there, but destroy it while they're there. I mean, what was the fate of Germany after World War II? How has their life been for the next 80 years? Well, for one, it's illegal to say anything I just said about the Jewish people if you live in Germany and many other European countries. For two, Germany is still paying reparations to Jews for the events of World War I and II. For three, all of the German nation's wealth was seized and captured and surrendered over to the Jews. And so this is the fate if you don't basically evict them before they destroy you. And what they'll say is that, oh, you're inciting violence against Jews by saying all this. You're saying that they're so dangerous that the only solution is to go and kill them and to hurt them. I'm not saying that. I never said that. If you've been watching the show, that hasn't come out of my mouth. In fact, it's been the opposite. It's saying that we're Christians. We don't believe in killing anybody for any reason. Judgment is a matter of God. God is the judge. All we are saying is, as Christians and as white people, we don't feel like Jewish people fit the needs of our leadership as a group. They don't fit the needs of representing white identity, and they don't fit the needs of representing Christians because they're neither of the above. So it's not a call to violence. It's just a call for a change in leadership. And I do think that the long-term strategy of how we achieve this is by providing a safe off-ramp. We don't want Jewish people hurt. We don't want anybody hurt. But they do have to be reprieved of their roles in leadership in our country. And that's that. That's all we're asking for. So to get back into this thread here, because I got off on a little bit of a tangent explaining the boycott that they did against Facebook, that they then did against Twitter, that they did against Kanye and Kyrie and Chappelle and Jamie Foxx. Michael Jackson talked about this. Taylor Swift talked about this. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who have come forward and then gotten bulldozed for it. So this next tweet says, the ADL advocates for the banning of individuals such as Nick Fuentes, Donald Trump, InfoWars, which is Alex Jones, Cobra Tate, which is Andrew Tate, and the War Room Pandemic. I don't actually know that account, so can't say who that is. It's clear that the ADL opposes free speech. Elon Musk should reinstate these accounts if he values free speech. The ADL is a group with a troubling past and wants to silence speech. There is a clear double standard as to what and who you can or cannot talk about. Rather than silence people, Elon Musk should allow for the deplatformed to have a voice and champion speech. Free them all. And then there is a photograph of one of Elon Musk's own tweets, which says, by free speech, I simply mean that which matches the law. I am against censorship that goes far beyond the law. If people want less free speech, they will ask government to pass laws to that effect. Therefore, going beyond the law is contrary to the will of the people. Yeah, the people have not asked the government to create more anti-Semitism laws and to censor speech about Jewish people. The only people who have asked for that are Jewish people. That's not representing the will of the country, that's representing the will of Jewish people. So Elon Musk needs to ask himself, is Twitter built to represent the best interest of Jewish people, or is it best purpose to represent all people of the free world, not even America? All races, all religious practices, all nations, humanity. Because it's very clear if the ADL influences Twitter the way that they have up until now, you're not getting the best thing for humanity, you're getting the best thing for them. And that's the end of that thread. So, pretty good thread. Nothing, that's I honestly didn't predict. I was kind of assuming that it was going to talk about the history of the ADL and Leon Frank, the rapist Jew who was guilty, who they came to the defense of, and then all of their boycotting that they've done over the years, the instigating of World War II, the instigating of all of the Middle East conflicts, the bombing of the USS Liberty that was not accidental, the selling of our government secrets to Iran and other hostile nations. We have a very, very tumultuous relationship with the Jewish people. And the nation of Israel and the Zionists who occupied the government and all of these other critical institutions in America, we have a problem with this relationship. It's not working for America. It's actively harmful to America. So it needs to be resolved. And the Overton window is moving forward, meaning it's more acceptable to start talking about this on these social media platforms, largely thanks to Kanye West and Elon Musk. Crazy enough, what kind of world do we live in where Elon Musk, they call him modern day Tony Stark, self-made, not really self-made. The guy inherited an emerald mine when he was born. But anyway, he actually understands the conflict in South Africa better than anybody because he is a South African white person. So I saw him coming out on Twitter this week saying, hey, what's going on with the calls for white genocide in the country where I'm from? That's not okay. I'm a white person from there. They're killing people right now. And I don't mean to be vague by people. I should be specific. They're killing white people only. They're targeting white people in South Africa and killing them because they're white. That should be a very serious problem for Elon Musk. It should be a very serious problem for all white people, especially those of us who are aware that we're only 8% of the world, you guys. We are not a majority. Even if you live in a European country, you might get the incorrect perception that we're the majority because we're the majority where you live, or maybe we were before the last 5 or 10 years of immigration and negative birth rates. But globally speaking, as a race, we are only 8%, and that number is going down. It's not going up. And it's going down for those two reasons, that we're not replacing ourselves. We're not having 2.75 children per couple. We're not even getting married. We're not even having the kids. And then in our countries, the population is being replaced and intermixed with people who are not white. And these are big problems for us. So that was that thread. I'm glad we got to go through that. I wanted to go through it for myself just to see if there were any new developments. Doesn't sound like there were. But maybe the development there is that thread is even on Twitter without being censored, that it's been on there for 6 hours so far. Hopefully it survives days, weeks, and never gets removed. We'll just have to see. So that's good stuff. How long have we been streaming for here? We've been streaming for 1 hour and 13 minutes. What do we want to talk about next? I got a couple of things as options to choose from. I have going through the second 5 of the Serene Rights of Manhood, because we only did the first 5. Let us see here. Jews started getting involved in every war and politics of all countries after the Napoleonic Wars. Yeah, they get involved from a financial leverage position where they get on both sides of the war. They did this throughout World War II. The Jews also helped finance the Nazis. And so you had the Rothschilds, who are a Jewish family, using their central banks to fund all of the Western alliance. And then you also had them financing the Axis evils, quote unquote. So they profiteer off of both sides. They know that war requires debt. You have to raise tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to produce all the military equipment you need to win a war or to defend yourself. And so who has that much capital laying around in their banks? Maybe the people who have been running the banks for the last several hundred years. Maybe the people whose religion permits and encourages usury, profiteering off of debt. Religions like Christianity specifically condemn usury. That's not true for their religion. And it's given them a strategic advantage throughout human history when it comes to leveraging debt and weaponizing debt and getting what you want without having to get your own hands dirty in a military conflict. You just put forth the capital with interest. So we have three things that I'm looking at in terms of, there's actually a quick thing I want to knock out. I got a DM earlier today from a follower who told me what was going on in their life. And they told me that they had recently been fired from their job because they were a teacher and they accidentally misgendered a child. And so the school fired them. Little Tommy, who is a biological boy, who was pretending to be a girl, this teacher called them, and I'm of course using fake names, I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, but I'm just explaining to you guys the evil that's happening out there and why we need to pray for our brothers. This teacher, talk about a good profession. People who go into teaching, that's such a selfless, important career path that we should celebrate and protect. No, instead, we fire them because they don't use the fake pronoun of the child who it wasn't even their idea. It was their twisted parents' idea to allow their children to live this fake life of the other gender. The teacher doesn't, either whether it's intentional or accidentally, doesn't play along with that, and then they get fired. And so what I would like to do is to just say a prayer for this individual and ask for God to come forth with new opportunities for them, to know that this individual was acting in God's commands, to respect the fact that God created men and women uniquely and differently than each other, and that Jesus calls for us to always live by the truth, to not perpetuate lies. And so that this man was only obeying God's orders from us and was punished for that. As Christians, we understand, Lord, that this is not a surprise, that you even warned us when Jesus was talking with the disciples that people will hate you in my name, that when you ask them to simply do what I'm telling you is right, they're going to hate you, they're going to punish you. I'm going to show you evidence of that as they crucify me, as they arrest and torture me. I'm going to show you how that works, but I want you to remember my life. We all remember Jesus's life as a symbol of this, of simply saying, this is what God wants you to do. People will not be okay with agreeing to disagree, that they're going to try to hurt us for doing this. And so we're seeing it happen again today, Lord. It's been happening for thousands of years. Our brother here got punished for simply trying to stand for your word, your truth. And this is the truth that protects us all. Lies hurt in the long term. They hurt the individual. They hurt the society. So we're trying to stand as guardians as to not let that happen. And we're taking the arrows for it, and we're happy to do so, Lord. We're never going to stop doing that. We are your soldiers here on this fallen realm, but we do need your help. So that's what we're praying for, Lord. We're asking for the help and the strength and the courage to take these arrows for you and to provide new opportunities when these are taken away from us, as they try to inflict this economical and personal pain on us for fighting for you, that you continue to provide for us, that you serve us new opportunities. You connect us and you expose us to the right circumstances and the right people to keep us enabled to keep your word true and alive in this sinful, fallen world. Thank you, Lord. We love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So that's just a quick prayer for our brother out there who's going through some difficult times. If you guys need prayers, I'm always open to take those. Either send them to me in my DM, drop them in chat. I'll pray for you. We all need it. So I also posted a video yesterday on Instagram of Jared Taylor, who is an older gentleman. At this point, he's probably 70 years old. And we're going to watch the video. I'm going to unmute my computer so you can hear it here coming out of the speaker on Instagram. And I'll mute myself on Twitch so you don't have an echo. And this is a longer watch. It's 5 minutes, so just hang out with me. We're going to watch it. You'll be very glad that you heard his commentary, because I am experiencing this in my life where people think that I am coming up with the things that I'm saying. They're saying, what happened to you where you have come up with these crazy anti-Semitic, hateful, bigoted, homophobic, transphobic, white supremacist, neo-Nazi views? That's what I'm getting thrown at me. They think this is all me, that I've come to these weird, crazy understandings of the world. And so then when you try to say, well, actually, there's somebody over here with 15,000 live viewers every night, Nick Fuentes, saying all the same things I'm saying. Well, they see him and they say, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's some 24-year-old arrogant kid who just thinks he's important because he's wearing a suit and a tie and he has his own website so nobody can shut him up. It's like they don't even see the problem in saying that, why would it be okay for people to be shutting him up in the first place? The fact that he has to stream on his own private website is evidence of the suppression of freedom of speech, coming from a very specific place, the ADL, coming from a very specific set of people. And so they'll dismiss my commentary, and then they'll dismiss Nick Fuentes' commentary. And so you just have to keep pulling the thread and say, these aren't my views, these aren't Nick's views. These views have been around for hundreds of years. And so here you have this journalist and author, Jared Taylor, who's been talking about this exact issue for decades. And so I watched a 30-minute speech he gave 10 years ago last night. It's kind of hidden on YouTube. It's not easy to find. After I sorted through all of the slander of calling him a neo-Nazi and white supremacist and all that, there's a video from the Young Turks that comes up that talks about how evil and stupid he is for his ideas. I scroll down long enough to find the full speech. It's 30 minutes. I watch it, and I picked out the last 5 minutes of the speech, and I shared that on Instagram yesterday. And it's doing well. It's getting shared around. What kind of likes and views are we getting here? It's almost up to 20 likes. I appreciate that. As I said, I only got 620 followers, so I can't expect every reel to sit there and hit hundreds, if not thousands, of likes. Especially with this content, this specific anti-Semitic comment, which is just, as we said, another way of criticizing Jews, or this specific white supremacist concept, which is just talking about white people deserving protection as a race the same way every race deserves to be protected. That's what this is going to go into for these 5 minutes. So we're going to pull that up and we're going to play it, and then I might pause it and add some commentary, or I might listen to the whole thing. We'll see. But take a drink of your beverage, get comfortable, and we'll listen to what Mr. Jared here has to say.
I would summarize as follows. First, and most important, the races are absolutely equal in every respect, and as a consequence, are really interchangeable. Race is therefore not a valid criterion for any purpose, except perhaps for redressing wrongs perpetrated by whites against non-whites. Whites as a group have no valid interest, so it is illegitimate for them to organize themselves as whites. And racial diversity is a wonderful thing in and of itself, and therefore whites should welcome large numbers of non-whites into their neighborhoods, their schools, their institutions, and into the country as a whole. The thinking is that immigration strengthens the United States, and at the same time, the reduction of whites to a minority is something to be celebrated, not just by the non-whites, but by whites themselves. As for miscegenation, we are not yet at the point when whites who marry each other are actively criticized. But whenever there is dating and marriage between the races, that is celebrated as prohibitions against wanting one's own numbers to increase. These prohibitions apply only to whites. All non-white groups take it for granted that they have collective interests that must band together to promote them at the expense of whites. Any white who is out of step with this thinking, by the way, who expresses a preference for European civilization and the company of other whites, such a person is not merely wrong, but evil and not fit for polite society. Every era has its unforgivable crimes, and for American whites today, our unforgivable crime, it is what is known as racism. And let me illustrate this revolution in the thinking of whites with a few quotations, as it happens from American presidents. James Garfield wrote, "I have a strong feeling of repugnance when I think of the Negro being made our political equal, and I would be glad if they could be colonized, sent to heaven, or got rid of in any decent way." Theodore Roosevelt, he blamed Southerners for bringing blacks into America. He said, "I have not been able to think out any solution of the terrible problem offered by the presence of the Negro on this continent. As for the Indian, I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are the dead Indians, but I believe 9 out of 10 are, and I shouldn't inquire too closely into the health of the 10th. As recent a president as Harry Truman wrote, "I am strongly of the opinion that Negroes should be in Africa, yellow men in Asia, and white men in Europe and America." Now let me contrast these remarks with those of a more recent president, George W. Bush. In 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit the city of New Orleans, a black rapper by the name of Kanye West complained that the federal aid response was slow because New Orleans was heavily black and George Bush just didn't care about black people. Well, in 2010, after he left office, Mr. Bush said that being accused of not caring about blacks was the worst moment in his entire presidency. The worst moment. And this is a president who had some mighty bad moments. One was the September 11 attacks of 2001, the most crushing economic slump since the Great Depression, this catastrophic war launched on completely false pretenses. But for him, the worst moment in 8 years of being president was being accused of racism by this two-bit Negro entertainer. This shows you just how utterly terrified Americans have become of race. And this terror leaves whites trapped in an impossible, really an intolerable position. Take the assumption, by the way, how many more minutes do I have? 2 or 3, all right. For the fact that all races are supposed to be equal in intelligence. So what happens when blacks and Hispanics do not succeed at the same level as whites? Because all the races are equal, this is the fault of whites. It is oppression and racism, and whites are made to feel guilty for the failures of others. Also, at the same time, what this means is that whites have no moral or intellectual foundation to say, no, I would prefer that my country be one in which whites remain the majority. That is blasphemy. That is a sin. And so, as the United States becomes increasingly non-white, I believe it will cease to be part of Western civilization and slide increasingly into the third world. Now, for some countries, that may be a good thing, because I think I can summarize without too much exaggeration our current foreign policy, which is, if we invade a country and shoot enough people, then the survivors will all turn into Jeffersonian Democrats. Now, our power to do this will decline very rapidly in the decades to come. But still, for someone like myself whose ancestors have lived in what was this outpost of Western civilization for 350 years, it is to me an unspeakably grievous thing to watch my country delude itself into what I see as a form of self-destruction. And I began this talk by saying that the history of race relations can be summarized in one word, conflict. I think I would conclude by saying it can be equally well summarized in yet another word, and that is tragedy.
Let's jump back to the front camera here. Get you guys all lined up in square again. There you go. I'm looking a little more Greekish today. I got the curly hair thing going because of the humidity outside. I normally don't like my hair to be curly. I like it to be straight, but what can I say? Walking the dog, and I went to the gym and all this other stuff. And the South in the summertime here in the U.S. is just humid. It just there's no way around it, and so my hair gets all frizzy and curly. But anyway, that guy's name is Jared Taylor. Hope you enjoy that 5-minute clip of him very well articulating, and maybe articulating in a more mature manner, the issues that we're talking about, the issue of white identity. NorCal, no, I do not currently have children. I pray that I will one day, God willing. I can't wait when that does happen. I've been preparing for a very, very long time. But I had to accept that I'm thinking about how to frame this. It was actually a conversation I had with my life group like 3 or 4 years ago when I was born again, started going to church. Another Christian asked me, because I was going on and on about this, about how I couldn't wait till fatherhood and get married. And one of the other Christians in the life group said, "Hey, what are you going to do? I'm not wishing this upon you, but sometimes it just happens that not everybody is blessed with a family. I mean, it could even be a medical reason why that doesn't happen. You never know, right? Tragedies happen. You do find the woman, the girl of your dreams, and then she dies. You find the woman of your dreams, you have children, and then the kids die. Like, there's terrible things that happen that can't be avoided. And it's just not guaranteed that you're ever going to receive the gift of being a father and husband. But either way, they were asking me to think through, how would you find happiness in life if that never came true? If it just so has it that God's will for you is other things, he needs you to be doing other things in the world other than having your own family. How are you going to be happy? How are you going to find fulfillment and happiness in life if those things just never come to you? And I thought that was a great change, like a great question that forced me to reevaluate my entire life. Because up until then, my North Star, my entire compass, everything I do, the career that I have, the physical fitness that I pursue, improving my mental health, even becoming more spiritual and going back to church again and figuring out who God was and all of that. All of that was so that I would be prepared to be a good husband and father. And so when they put out that hypothetical question of, well, what if those things don't come true? Was your entire life just a waste? Like, I was like, well, that would suck. And so that opened the door for me to figure out a different priority in life that I can do in the meantime while hoping that God fulfills my desire for those things. I don't even know myself well enough to know that having a family and kids is going to offer me that fulfillment that I've longed for my entire life, that was missing up until I found God, because I was thinking that's the only way for me to be happy, was to have that to be that husband and to have the kids, that those are the only ways I could eventually be happy. Well, in forming a relationship with God and learning who Jesus was and the message that Jesus was spreading here on earth, I found something equally fulfilling. This is one of the beauties of Christianity, is that it gives you something to do with your life, which is to stand for what God wants from us, to be the defender of the code that God has given us in terms of how we're supposed to live as humans. You can play a part in that. You have an essential role in that. Without the gospel being handed down from generation to generation and people explaining it, you can't just hand out the book and trust that everybody is going to read it and understand it correctly. You actually have to be out there interpreting and evangelizing. That's the great commission that Christians are called to. Now, it takes time to get to a comfortable place where you can even do that effectively. You need to have actually sat down and read the scripture, for one. You need to have been going to church for a while and understand what the institution of church is and what it's there for. There's a lot that you need to invest. And it took me 3 or 4 years of maturing in my faith before I could really realize that purpose, that alternative purpose in life of being somebody who put Christ ahead of all other priorities. I mean, the fact of the matter is, and it's not to sound arrogant and it's not to sound narcissistic or anything like that, but you can see what I look like. You've seen what my physique looks like. You've seen me be able to sit here and have open dialogue about controversial and sensitive subjects. I do well in my career. If I really, really wanted to spend all of my time trying to find that woman who I can have a family with, I could. Like, if it was still that top priority in my life, I probably could find that woman. I could go out on a first date every night of the week. I could be on every dating app. I could be joining all these social clubs. I could be prioritizing that if I felt like it was the most important thing to do with my life. But it's not. Like, it got downgraded to priority number 2 after I decided that my life is not mine. My life isn't even about my priorities and what I think is going to be best for me. All of these I's and me's and all this other stuff, my future, I put all that down to number 2 and said the future of Christ here on earth is the most important thing to me as a Christian. And so that's what I'm going to spend my time doing. I'm going to sit here an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, streaming about what? Streaming about the importance of Christianity. That feels far more important for me than finding that individual that I spend the rest of my life with, if they're even out there. So, thanks for the question, NorCal, though. Oh, that was probably far more than you cared to hear about, a little bit of TMI, but that's the status of things right now. 123, I suggest you find an Eastern European wife. Hey, I think that's good advice. Actually, I dated a Ukrainian girl before I moved to this side of the country, and she had only been in the US for like less than a year. And she was a great girl. Like, I got to say, she was great. The problem with her, she was Christian. The problem with that situation and why it didn't work out was she is of the younger generation. She's in her early 20s. And according to society, if you're a woman in your early 20s, you have no business getting married. You should be out there dating as many people as possible, trying to create some kind of career so that you're financially independent, so that you're not dependent on a man. You're trying to avoid having children because that cuts off your ability to have your own career and date around for another 10 years to find like the ideal husband, not just an ideal husband, but somehow the diamond in the rough unicorn out there who both looks like Brad Pitt and is also a zillionaire and who is loyal and who is a certain height and who has the right eye color and who has the right hair. And it's like, they think that they can spend 10 or 20 years sifting through the dating pool to find this unicorn out there. So things didn't work out with my Eastern European potential wife, unfortunately. Maybe she'll come around. I don't know. I haven't talked to her ever since I left that side of the country, and I don't really expect to, but you got to let people live. Like, I didn't hold it against her. I knew she's a product of her time. And if you ask any woman in their early 20s, even the Christian ones will say that marriage and kids at early 20s is not their top priority. These girls who come to America just for money aren't good girls. Hey, what can I say? Maybe I just need to go and find them. I can't trust that they're going to come to me. I need to go to Europe. And then it's just a matter of what part of Europe. Do I want an Italian girl? Do I want a Greek girl? I wouldn't mind going to Sweden. I would like a good Swede. Maybe Norway. Not going to Ireland. Sorry, not going to do that. Help me learn some Eastern European language so you can ruse her up. I was actually thinking about trying to learn either Russian or Ukrainian when I was dating her. She taught me a couple words. She taught me mops. Rizzer, I know what you mean by Riz. She taught me what pug, the dog. Like my dog is a pug. She said the Russian word for that is mops, which I think that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty cool. So what else were we saying? So we watched this video about white identity, right? Jared Taylor. And one of the things I said before I even played that video was that people get the misconception that when they see a guy my age in my 30s, or they see a guy in the younger demographic in his 20s or even teens talking about white identity, they think it's like this new alt-right neo-Nazi, whatever the New York Times is calling people like us. That's what they think it is. Like it's some new radical phenomenon. And it's not. Like there have been people living in America and living in every European country who have been watching the white race slowly become the minority in their countries for decades. And they've been trying to say something about it for decades. And they haven't been able to because they've either been censored officially, like they've actually just been banned. Jared Taylor is banned from Twitter. Nick Fuentes is banned from Twitter. My social media posts continue to get censored and banned. I've been banned from Craigslist. My first Facebook account got banned. I have a lot of strikes against my YouTube account. I have 2 out of 3 strikes on my YouTube account to the point where I've basically just given up because if I make one more mistake, I lose my YouTube account permanently. And here on Instagram, I have 2 community guideline violations for misinformation. And, so it's precarious even trying to continue to talk about these things, but we don't have a choice. Like what is the alternative? Let America go from currently 62% white to 40% white, which it's projected to do in the next 20 years. By the time I have kids and my kids are having kids, America is going to be a 30% white country. So what? Just accept that's how it has to be, that I can't stop it, that we can't stop it, that's the best thing for America, that's the best thing for white people, that people who created America. Like I can't just sit by and not say anything. I can't sit by and go, oh, but I'm going to lose my social media account. And I can't sit by and say, well, they're going to try to call my employer and call me a white supremacist or a Nazi and get me fired. I've talked about this before on my show. I have had my 6-figure income attacked where people on the internet found my content, went to my employer, and tried to get me fired. They tried to make it so that I could not eat, I could not pay my bills because of the stuff that I say on my social media. And all I ever say on my social media is, we got to stand by Christianity and we got to stand by European cultural practices. That's the shoulders that we stand on in the Western world. So it's a real threat, the cancel culture, all that stuff. So I wrote down a few things that he said during those 5 minutes that I wanted to say, yes, sir, totally. We hear you. You guys need to remember these talking points. One of them was observing the shift in being able to talk about racial differences in public. And he even used the president of the United States as an example, meaning this is more relevant than Josh or somebody else talking on social media. It's more relevant than some journalist writing a newspaper article. It's more relevant than an author publishing a book. This is the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, openly saying white people and black people are different. Trying to live together is a recipe for conflict. And if he had his way, he would have African people simply sent back to wherever they came from. Or at a minimum, ensure that segregation, which is why we had segregation, was maintained so that we don't have perpetual conflict between the races. These are the presidents, multiple presidents of the United States saying these things less than 25 years ago. So we went from that to George Bush in 2002, 2003, saying The worst thing that happened to him in his entire presidency was being called racist. And this is the guy who had 9/11 happen on his watch, that had the worst terrorist attack in American history and in a lot of global history. This guy is saying the fact that a black rapper called him racist is the worst thing that came out of his presidency. Not the fake wars where we said there's weapons of mass destruction and we went in and completely destroyed these cities in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's not the worst thing that he did. That's not the worst thing that people had to say about him. The worst thing was when there was a hurricane that happened in a primarily black city. Some black person said, "You're not helping us enough down here because you hate black people." That's seriously the hardest, most difficult thing you went through in your presidency in comparison to 9/11, to jumbo jets being flown into your national World Trade Centers that represent they're symbols of American success and capitalism. The war in Iraq also caused a lot of refugees to run to Europe. Absolutely. That's the thing, is that wasn't accidental. That wasn't like, oh, dang, we didn't see that coming. If Israel were the primary agitators of 9/11 who helped facilitate 9/11, they knew we were going to come to Iraq and create that military conflict. They knew that that would cause the refugee crisis of people leaving those third world countries and going into European countries. So this was a predetermined outcome. There's actually, oh gosh, what is the paper called? The clean break. The clean break policy, I think, is what it's called. It's a government written, it's like written by 4 or 5 Jewish individuals in the United States government. It's a letter of advice for how the United States foreign policy should interact with Israel coming up in the years beyond 2000. And this is before 9/11, shortly before 9/11. It happens like 1996 or something like that. 9/11 happened in 2001. And so you have these Jewish advisors to the leaders of America where they say, it's extremely important that we go and confront these growing threats in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and all the others, Pakistan, as Mr. Obama liked to call it. They're telling the U.S. government, we have to go and handle these dangerous military situations over here. It's like, well, are they a threat to the United States? No, they're a threat to Israel. This request is coming from 4 Jewish authors. And so it's basically presenting the future strategy for how the U.S. military will go in after 9/11 to each one of these countries and basically level them so they're no longer a threat for Israel. And Israel's happy about this. The Zionists are happy about this because this creates the refugee crisis. That word crisis is so annoying because it implies that it's a random event that we're just responding to the best that we can. Like they called it the COVID crisis. No, this was a man-made, facilitated, planned, methodical operation. It's not a crisis. Yeah. And 123, I saw your comment saying we need to normalize people having more than 3 children. You're a little broad by saying people. I would say we need to make sure white people specifically are having more than 3 children. We need white husbands and wives having 5, 6, 7, or 8 kids apiece. And I know my part on that. I'm not holding up my end of the bargain. Like, I'm trying, you guys. I'm trying to find the right wife to have these kids with. The white, right, Christian wife to have 5, 6, 7 kids with. But this is part of why youth matters when you're talking about finding a spouse. People want to judge me in my 30s for dating a girl in her early 20s. It's like, well, I need a woman who's going to be able to give birth for 10 straight years. Like, I'm not joking. That's true. And it takes an entire year, basically, to deliver one child full term, to rebound, and then even consider having another child. So it's going to take a full decade for this woman, whoever she is, to go and have all these children with me. So it's like, I can't help it. I can't date a 40-year-old woman. I can't even date a 35-year-old woman. it would probably not be smart to date a 30-year-old woman. It's like my age range has got to be like between 18 to 25. That's it. And people are like, whoa, you some kind of pedophile because you're dating an 18-year-old? She's half your age. Yeah, technically that's true. But let me ask you this. Are you just being a hater? Because if the purpose of a woman, an adult woman, 18-year-old is an adult woman, is to bring life into this world, and even better, bring life that is in obedience to God, who is Jesus Christ. If that's the purpose of a woman, then I need to be finding a woman who has the best ability to do so. And that means fertility. That means the amount of time left in her fertile life to accomplish that. So, hey, if it's 18 years old and she's ready for that, I'm not forcing, family on her. I can't force family and marriage on people. It's not like it's a situation of rape. Like, if an 18-year-old woman wants to marry me, wants to have my kids, who are you to tell her that that's not the right thing to do with her life? What, because you're an old cat woman who's addicted to boxed wine, and you think that being a 38-year-old boss girl who's never been married and you don't have any kids and your time is running out, so you're judging me for dating a younger woman instead of picking you? Like, no, that you're talking about your problems. You having a problem with me dating a younger woman is because you have problems. Nothing to do with me. There was a case here where one feminist was infertile and blamed her husband and put him on a lot of medicines he didn't need. He died soon after. Dang, dude, that's tragic. Women stop being fertile around 60. Well, yeah, you're talking about full-fledged menopause, but women stop losing peak fertility in their 20s, mid to late 20s. With every consecutive year, the likelihood of birth defects and miscarriages goes up every single year. So we don't want those. We want a wife who's not having to go through the trauma of losing her child because she waited until she was 34 years old to have her first child. We don't want that. I mean, it's also obvious that I want as much time as possible with my kids. I don't want to be a decrepit 60-year-old man trying to go out and play baseball and football with my kids. So, I got priorities, but none of those priorities are the number one. The number one priority is getting people to know Jesus Christ. That's always priority number one. That'll never change. So in this video, we were just talking about how the tone of talking about racism in the short span of a couple decades went from United States presidents talking about how difficult it is to get white people and black people to live in the same space to, in 2002, 2003, George Bush saying, the worst thing that has ever happened to me was being called racist. That's insane. That's crazy. As Nick Fuentes would say, that's crazy. I mean, that is a very tangible example of just how emotionally charged speaking about race has become. And that's not accidental. That's intentional. They do not want white people talking about racial solidarity. They don't want people talking about the fact that the races are different. And when you try to force them to live amongst each other, you're inviting conflict. And it's conflict that can't be stamped out. You can't not have conflict when you have different cultures trying to practice their cultures amongst each other. 123 saying, my mom had me at 39 and I'm lucky to have come out 100% okay, apparently. Yes, sir, you are. JV, that's statistically true. Women in their late 30s have a lot of problems with pregnancy. I know personally people in their 30s, women in their 30s who have lost their children. And it is a very difficult thing to go through. 123 says, I want to be married at 20, but your story today about the dog and parenting hit, and now I am changing my opinions on that. That's a fair hesitance to say, hey, I got to make sure I'm a fully capable man before I go inviting in taking care of a woman and taking care of children. What I don't want to do is scare people out of the responsibility that those things will entail. There is no denying it's factually true, especially when you're talking about having to financially provide for a woman if you want her to be at home taking care of the kids without a job herself, which is my recommendation. Then you got to be bringing home good money. And it takes time to get to a point in your career where you are bringing home good money. Now, you can balance this out and you can offset the need for more and more money by living more frugally, right? I mean, this is a real talk about materialism and what are you willing to settle for in terms of your living conditions and the bonus items that you have in life, the nicer car, the nicer apartment, the nicer laptop instead of the laptop that just gets by, clothes, all of that stuff. If you're willing to compromise, you can totally make it happen. You can make it work to where you and your wife are living together in a 1-bedroom apartment and you're getting by, you're able to feed yourself. You spend a year or two like that. Hopefully by then you've gotten to the next step in your career where you have a bit more money than you did. And that'll be enough money to feed a third mouth in your house and to provide clothes for them and to pay their medical bills. And your career will continue to grow and your income will scale. Especially if you hang out with me, I'll teach you these things. I was afraid of these same things as well. I was like, how the hell am I ever going to get to a 6-figure income? Because at the time, in my early 20s, I was working for $10 an hour, which, we're obviously talking about US dollars here, which is nothing more than $20,000 a year. That's like barely enough to stay alive in a 1-bedroom apartment myself. And even though I felt inside of me that I knew I wanted a wife and kids, I was thinking exactly like you were, 1, 2, 3. I was saying, it kind of doesn't matter that I want those things. I can't pull it off. And the same thing happened to me with the dog. You mentioned the video I posted earlier today. Emotionally, I wanted it. In the same way, emotionally, I wanted the wife and kids. I wanted the dog, but it turned out, practically speaking, I didn't have the time of day because I'm splitting my time between going to school full time, working full time, trying to prioritize my physical health and going to the gym. And there weren't the hours in the day for me to take care of a dog. So I admire the fact that you're intelligent enough to take stock of your resources. And your resources aren't just your money. Your resources are also your emotional capacity and the number of hours per day you have to devote to these things. So, like I said, I never want to talk people out of or scare them out of having a family young by talking about the difficulties of doing it. Because the fact of the matter is, if you're trying to aim for having 5 kids, you do need to get started young and you want to have several decades to play with them and you want to be alive for the next generation. You want to get to experience your children having children, right? You want to be a grandparent. So don't be scared. If you're a Christian, you know that God will provide. And that looks very different for every individual. It doesn't always mean he's going to provide by giving you a higher paying job. God providing might mean you meet a friend or a family member is willing to step up. Your community is willing to step up and help you find a second part-time job or help you with childcare, help you get an education that you're going to need for growing and scaling that career. God will provide in all of those areas. But I will tell you this, he's not going to provide if you're not looking for him. If you don't trust him, if you don't believe in him, then he is not going to be actively intervening in your life on your behalf. He might keep you out of danger because he doesn't want you to die. He might allow you to continue to sin without immediately striking you down and judging you for it. He's going to allow you to do those things because those are the things that are required for you to learn. To become stronger, you have to make your own mistakes. You have to be allowed to exercise the free will that he gave you because he loves you. He doesn't want you to be a slave. My goal in life is for my grandparents to see me having my children, their great grandchildren. Dude, I would love that. I'm going to have a hard time pulling that off, unfortunately. My grandparents and I, uh, with where I'm at, I'm already 36. It's going to be difficult. What's going on, Harley? I see you. Thanks for stopping in tonight. You're an hour and a half late. Okay, we've been talking for an hour and a half, but either way, I'm sorry, 2 hours. You're 2 hours late. But I know you love me. I know you are one of my biggest supporters, not just here on Instagram, but Harley and I have known each other for a long time. Outside of the social media world, we actually know each other. We're good friends. And she's been very supportive of everything I've done throughout my entire social media life and even in my personal life. So, love you, sister. Hope you and your husband are doing well down there. So we watched this clip about Jared Taylor. He talked about the issue that race has become such a charged, emotionally demanding subject that we can't even talk about it anymore. In the short span of 20 years, the United States president used to be able to say black people and white people are fundamentally different and have a hard time living together. In the span of 20 years, it's become illegal to even suggest something like that. As a common citizen, there's no way you would ever hear a politician say something like that. No, much less the president of the United States, and not even somebody like Donald Trump, who is based in, a conservative I guarantee you, Donald Trump knows black people and white people are different. And we're different than Asian people, and we're different than Hispanic people, and that Jews are a different type of people. Donald Trump knows this, I promise you. Anybody with a high IQ or just a reasonable ability to think critically and look around them at the world and their own community, they know that the races are different. We are just as a population being blackmailed and emotionally manipulated into not talking about it. So he mentioned another thing Jared did in that 5 minutes that is, again, highly controversial because it pertains to race. And he suggested that currently, up until now, it is not yet frowned upon for a white person to date and marry and recreate with another white person. At this point in time, that's still seen as normal. That's still seen as okay. But it's obviously encouraged to do the other route if you're white. It's celebrated. Everybody talks about how open-minded and how you're a special star child if you're white and you marry some other race, right? You're like, wow, you're just the best. You're who white people should be. White people should be people who marry non-white people. Okay, is that same standard true for any other race? Do we expect Asian people to not marry Asian people? Even further, do we call Asian people racist if they insist on only marrying another Asian person? Of course not. That is ludicrous. That's insane. So why is there this idea that a white person saying, I don't want to date anybody other than white people. I don't want to have children with anybody other than a white person. I'm not going to marry anybody other than a white person. Why is that white supremacy? Why is it not Asian supremacy when they do that, and black supremacy when they do that, and fucking Indian supremacy when they do that? Yeah, in East Asian countries, they have open taboos about marrying foreigners. That's true in almost the entire world. It's only true in European countries where white people are the majority demographic that multiculturalism and interracial dating is celebrated and promoted and encouraged. It's only European countries. It's not European culture. It's European countries. And so when Nick Fuentes goes on Fresh and Fit, for example, and he's in a room full of 12 black women, and he drops the bomb on them all with the 100,000 people watching the stream, he just says casually, no, I'm against race mixing. Yeah, I know. I'm against that. I would not advise race mixing. people's minds explode. They're like, whoa, you can't be an American and say that. That's hate speech. What do you mean you're against race mixing? They think even the term race mixing is like derogatory, insulting, etc. And so this is the conversation you guys have to be able to have. You need to be able to point out the hypocrisy of when a white person says they have some kind of preference for white culture, white dating, white recreation, etc. We are literally called evil people. He said in the video, it's essentially social blasphemy. It's a sin. You need to be able to point out that hypocrisy because it immediately levels the playing field and it destroys this concept of racism. Because if it's okay for every other race to do it, to prefer themselves over other races, there is no reason whatsoever as to why it wouldn't be appropriate, totally justifiable for white people to feel that way. So I think those are the only clip notes that I wrote down about that Jared Taylor clip. If you want to see the full video, which I suggest you do go watch, because he goes into the history. The first 25 minutes of the video that I didn't show you was talking about some of the bullet points that liberals and especially black people want to criticize white people about pertaining to American history. We all know what I'm talking about. We're talking about slavery. And we're also talking about the Native Americans, the minority community, the ethnic, the BIPOC community. What is it? Black. What does the I stand for in people of color? Indigenous. Black, indigenous, meaning Native American, and people of color, meaning all the other ethnicities. He talks about those two subjects that are always thrown back at white people pertaining to America's history. They say, well, America is evil because of colonialism. They came to America and they just slaughtered indiscriminately the Native Americans. That's one argument they say as to why white people are evil. And then they say, do I need to even point out slavery? It's like, well, what about it? Well, white people enslaved black people, and that's how America's economy boomed, and that's how America discovered the prosperity that it did over the future centuries. So I mentioned this is subject material that comes from the 30-minute video. If you want to hear his rebuttal to these things, you should watch it. But if you want to hear him explain what actually happened with the Native Americans and how we arrived here in peace, that there were instigations to the Jonestown establishment when we first got here, that they were shooting first. We built a defensive facility to protect ourselves. They wouldn't let it go. There's documented history as to both sides. I'm not sitting here saying that white people didn't do bad things to Indians, and I'm not sitting here saying that some slaves were subject to human abuse, violations of human rights. Obviously, those things happened. But the degree at which they happened and the details as to why they happened, for how long they happened, to how many people they happened, and whether or not these things that happened are unique to America. And that's the ultimate middle finger, is that turns out, no, they're not. Every single country has a blood-soaked flag, meaning the people who are currently there conquered that territory. They came and evicted whoever was there before them, whether it was a tribe amongst themselves or it was a foreign nation or people. Every country out there has experienced this problem, and every country out there has experienced slavery. Every ethnicity out there has both enslaved other people and been the enslaved. So these things are not unique to America. And so the fact that they try to use them to criticize white people in America or European colonialists, it's like, do you know how the Egyptians built all of their stuff? Have you ever looked into that? Have you ever read the Bible? Do you know who facilitated the North American slave trade? Do you know who sold the slaves? Other Africans? Do you know who owned the slave ships? The Jewish people? There's a lot of blood and blame to go around when you talk about the history of slavery in North America. It's not a uniquely white person sin. So anyway, that's in the 30-minute video that I watched last night. It is called A Brief History of the U.S. Racial Relations by Jared Taylor. It's on YouTube. It's not the only video of his. I actually flagged a couple of others that I'm going to watch, maybe even tonight. There's one of them that's an hour. I had a follower send me one right before I got on live tonight. That's an hour long that is from like early 90s. So the one I just talked about was from 10 years ago. The one he sent me is from the 1990s, where he's saying the exact same stuff. The message hasn't changed. The problems haven't changed. He said, bro, us Slavs didn't enslave other people, but we came from slaves, hence the name Slav. Yes, that is true. Slav being slave. I find that more of a etymology conversation about like where does the root word come from for slave or slavery comes from Slavs. Like that's an interesting conversation, and it is relevant, the fact that Caucasians were enslaved, but the etymology about the word slave and Slav and all that, it's like, yeah, that's also true. It's like bonus knowledge. Okay, what else did I have on the agenda? I had two other things, and I'm thinking one of them is going to get pushed till tomorrow, so hopefully I'm not disappointing anybody. The one we're going to push till tomorrow is the numbers 6 through 10 of the Serene rights of manhood. I did 1 through 5 earlier today, and that was an hour and a half stream. We're already 2 hours into this session, and I want to give those last 5 tenets due attention. I really want to talk about them. I want to talk about them in detail, the same way I talked about the 5 this morning. So we're going to push that till tomorrow. But we will do one other conversation tonight, which is, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, some opportunities we have with the growth of this channel. Beholden the Truth is growing pretty quickly. And only 2 or 3 weeks ago, this channel was at 500 followers. I remember because I was very, very happy about that, because not that long before that, Harley can attest to this. Herb Emporium, you saw her hanging out in chat. She's been with me for the entire life of this social media channel, which wasn't even a political channel to start with. It was a channel devoted to fitness and my fitness progression. You know, I posted progress or pictures back when I was smaller, back when I had no muscle, back when I was still learning how to diet. You know, if you look at my front page, you can see that I have almost 1,000 posts on here. The first several hundred of them, I think even the first 500 of them, are all about the fitness life, talking about bodybuilding, talking about cardio, talking about supplements, talking about the bigger picture of how getting involved with fitness changed my life in many other ways. It improved my mental health. So that's how this channel began. But then once I got involved with the political stuff, COVID happened, is when that really happened. In 2020, I had some stuff going on in my personal life, and COVID exposed a lot of the corruption in society. And so when I saw my own government acting in ways that were harmful to the people, in ways that directly violated our Constitution, things that I never thought the government would do. I was naive. I was stupid, okay? Full disclosure, I'm not a brilliant political interpreter or intelligent social commentator. I was oblivious up until I was like 33 as to how the government actually worked and the extent of human corruption that's possible. So 2020, COVID comes along, and I see the pharmaceutical industry creating this vaccine that, it turns out it's not a vaccine, in that it doesn't even stop you from getting the infection. It doesn't stop you from transmitting the virus. And it doesn't even save you from dying from the virus. And it doesn't even seem to have that much of an effect on reducing side effects. So like, in what way is this a vaccine? And then I see them start to hide the negative side effects of it. Then I see the fact that they hid the clinical trial data they tried to hide it for 75 years, and they were forced through a lawsuit to actually publish that clinical trial data, which then illustrated the clinical trials were insufficient and that the drug should have never went to market in the first place. Then we found out the details about the virus itself, not the vaccine, but the virus not being a biological, organic, once in a generation virus that came from a bat out of a cave in Wuhan, China. We find out that it's actually a man-made virus, which is a fancy way of saying a biological weapon that the US helped fund and create through the biological research labs in Ukraine. Where does Ukraine sound familiar with recent current events? And then you find out we have like a dozen biological research labs in Ukraine. And that's what really red pilled me, politically speaking. I figured out that our government is not in any way what I thought it was. So it was a year of awakening, and the tone of my social media account over the course of 2020, 2021, and then into 2022 and 23, it just goes up and up and up in terms of political commentary, while the downward trend on my social media account is physical fitness, the fitness modeling stuff I got involved with. Those things are obviously still priorities to me because physical health is very, very important. That's why it's, what was it, number 2 or 3? I think number 4 of the Serene Rights of Manhood. Number 4 was you need to be physically fit. You need to be physically capable. I talked about why in the video earlier today about that example of my dog, the example of confronting a thief and getting my $200 back that just happened to me last week. So the subject here is that this social media account, now that it's been repurposed for the two primary reasons of protecting the white race and spreading the gospel, the account has gained a lot of popularity since then, since really crystallizing that message and making it clear that this is what we're here for. My account went from 200 followers very quickly to 500 followers, and then it went from 500 to 600 in a matter of a couple weeks. And now it's at 620, and we're picking up like 5 to 10 followers every single day. So I love to see this, obviously. That means the gospel's getting out there, and that means that more white people are becoming awake and they're participating in the conversation, that they have the courage to share this amongst each others. JV, you are absolutely right in saying I need to have a backup just in case they shut this down, because I'm not going to say I lose sleep over it. I sleep great, actually. I sleep very well. But I know in the back of my head, because of the Serenity Prayer, which is one of the 10 serene rights of manhood, the Serenity Prayer teaches us to focus on what we can control and to simply come to peace with the things we can't control. I genuinely cannot stop the ADL from hitting up Instagram or Facebook or Twitch or whoever else and saying, hey, this guy's being anti-Semitic. You need to shut him down. I can't stop that. I don't have the financial resources, and I can't control the entire societal censorship that's happening. It's too complex. None of us can. So you just have to act with pure faith in God that He will operate on our behalf. He will move the levers that we can't move. That's what the Serenity Prayer is about. But anyway, with the growth of the channel, I was thinking today, and I sent myself an email because I didn't want to lose the notes that I had written down. So here they are. I'm thinking that we need to start working on establishing a team for Beholden to Truth, where I can have some internships and some kind of assistance with this work that we're doing. And I'm thinking I would need help with stuff like social media management and content creation. Because I can sit here and stream for 2 hours, come here with an agenda, talk about how it's related to the two big subjects, how they're related to current events, the things we see happening. The example like Jamie Foxx, the Kanye West, the Kyrie Irving. I can pull the examples of the Jewish authors writing all the anti-white books out there. we can talk about all those things, and I'm happy to do that homework and get myself on screen. I have the ability, because of the blessings God's given me with my career, the ability to work from home, the fact that no one else is dependent on me. I don't have a wife and kids who can't eat if suddenly I lose my job, for example. And this is a real threat. I told you they came after my last job. So there are people who want to spread this message, but they can't put their face and their name on this message. And a lot of you, a lot of my followers and friends, you're in that boat. You can't say, my name is Josh, and here is what I look like, and I have a problem with the anti-white narrative, and I don't like the Jewish religion because it conflicts directly with my Christianity. You want to say these things, but you know it's risky to do so. You can't afford to have them come after your career, etc. I totally get it. I don't expect everybody to be able to do what I'm currently doing. But you can still help. And that's done through sharing the content, sharing the stories, hitting up people when I'm live and saying, hey, come watch this guy. I see you guys doing that and it's greatly appreciated. That's why the account has blown up 25% in a matter of only a couple of weeks. So I appreciate your role in helping this grow. But there's more opportunity out there. Right now, you guys are just doing that informally, casually, if you feel so inclined. But I do want to extend the opportunity out there that if you want to work with me formally, if you want to talk with me offline about how you can help, then I am open to that. I want you guys to be able to maybe actually grow some skills. And this shouldn't just be a recreational thing that you do. It's not just I'm scrolling through Instagram and I'm watching Beholden the Truth to make sure I know what's going on, but you could also be using this to grow skills. And some of the skills you're growing are social media management and content creation and the growth of a brand and trying to scale that brand to a larger audience. I have the management experience in my professional career now for 10 years specifically in regards to managing long-term strategies and people. That's what I do for a living. That's why I get paid. So that's what pays the bills. That's what pays for my dog's dog food. So I have the skills to do all that, to organize this and to have a future vision, to create a roadmap. I have the unique ability to put my face on it. I have the technological background and ability to stream on multiple platforms. I put up $1,000 laptop so I could get back to streaming again on Twitch. So as I said, I can take care of a lot of the mechanics in the background, but what I'm struggling with, where I think this account and this message could grow far more substantially, is if I had people also working on my behalf intentionally to grow it. And I'm not in a position to pay people to do that. I make good enough money so that I can put away my acorns for my future wife and future children. I can do that. I can make sure when I lose my job, as I did in a month ago, I got laid off, that things don't just crumble and fall apart. I have enough money to get by until I find my next job. So it's not a crisis or anything, but I don't currently have the money to grow a 600 follower count channel. Now, in the future, if this does become an actual enterprise that I can monetize, then everybody who helped me get to that point, to that milestone, will be brought in terms of if we can have formal employees and other people start actually financially benefiting from this. I'm not financially benefiting from it now, so nobody is. But if that were possible in the future, the people who helped me establish the foundation would be the people I look at for paid internships and for being formal employees. So if that's interesting to you, feel free to hit me up. Say you want to be a part of it. I'll say a couple of things in terms of specific examples as to what I need help with. Here are a few of the categories you could help out with on the Beholden the Truth team. I record these whole episodes on Twitch, and I record them simultaneously on Instagram, but I don't push them to YouTube, largely because the subjects we talk about, when I go off on my Jewish tangents and when I talk about COVID being a biological weapon, that kind of stuff, YouTube is still highly controlled in terms of their censorship and their community guidelines. So I wish within Twitch, the platform, if you guys haven't streamed there yourself, within Twitch, there actually is a button that just says send entire stream to YouTube. And that's great if you can do that. But when I have these tangents and when I try to provide the background and the sources, the citations, some of that stuff gets a little tricky in sharing it with YouTube. So I have to be able to trim my content so that it is adherent to the community guidelines of other platforms. So there's trying to get my edited content onto YouTube, and then there's also trying to push, whether through notifications or tweets or Instagram posts and stories and reels, to try to get this content in smaller digestible snippets. You know, the kind that people can actually receive in 60 seconds, maybe a 3-minute video. That's the stuff that really, I know this from personal experience, from when I, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, concentrated on creating reels, those quick 2 or 3 minute videos, even a minute and a half. Those are the things that started bringing in consistently 5 followers a day, 10 followers a day, and suddenly a couple hundred followers in the matter of a couple weeks. So I need help distilling my content that I record over the course of an entire hour into 1 and 2 minute digestible pieces. Yeah, JV, you know the deal. People have short attention spans. That's just the truth. That's the nature of social media. We live in the TikTok generation. And so another struggle that I have is TikTok. I like it as a platform. I've used it before. I used it more about a year or two ago. And it was usually used for the fitness stuff. But once I got especially political, I'm just having a hard time managing this many different social media accounts. Like, I do the stream on Instagram and simultaneously stream it on Twitch. Then I try to trim some of the content for smaller videos on Instagram, but you also want to get the message out there on Twitter that, hey, if you want to hear about this subject, you can come watch the full video here on Instagram. I would prefer to be streaming on Rumble, because Rumble would allow me to talk about these issues without the risk of censorship, without my entire account and all of my following being wiped out overnight. So I need to be streaming on Rumble. That's like, in terms of me being a good manager and prioritizing what's the most important. If I could work with somebody on making sure my content is on Rumble and that I'm streaming on there, that would be a huge win for us, because that's called risk management. In the sector of woods that I manage in, one of the skills you have to have is risk management, which means first identifying what are the things that can happen to you that will compromise the long-term mission. Well, the thing that can happen to me that compromises everything is my account getting blown out. So the way risk mitigation works is, after you identify the risk, how can you mitigate it? Well, in the case of social media, you need to be on a quote unquote free speech platform, such as Rumble or Gab would be another good example. BitChute, you guys know, is another good example for genuinely free speech. So I need a way to get this content onto Rumble consistently, ideally even BitChute. We need the smaller reel length, REEL length, snippets of content, video edits, and other promotional content, and even your own content, just reacting to or citing the stuff that I publish. It's a synergistic effort, in that once you react to my content, I can tag you and say, here is what other people think of what I have to say. It's not just me who thinks that. It's these other people who agree with me. It's not a random or corner of the internet worldview to say that Christianity comes first and white European culture is the thing that keeps us all safe and happy. That's not a totally obscure idea, but the more publicly we can cite each other as references that others share this worldview, the more normalized it becomes, the safer it becomes to share it. All right, Harley, take care. Tell the man I said hello. I'm not going to use his name. People don't need to know his name, but we're good friends. So anyway, this internship opportunity is out there to anybody, any of my followers who want to get engaged. It's your way to safely support the message, I would say, without compromising people going after you and your job, or coming after your family members and saying, hey, did you know such and such said this about Jewish people? Like, for real, that's what people do to me. They go after my family and say, did you know that your ex, I want to protect my family. So I don't like to specify whether or not I'm talking about a cousin, a brother, a parent, a grandparent, a coworker, a friend. I have to protect other people because people have a problem with what I have to say. So no reason to cite anybody specifically. And with that said, I want to say, for those who do choose to help out with Beholden to Truth, if you don't want me to tag you, or if you don't want me to say, hey, my editor helped out with this, and the editor's name is such and such account, then I won't. Obviously, I'm not trying to get anybody into hot water with their own accounts and with their own families and coworkers and etc. But if you were interested in building a professional resume where you can say, I helped out as an activist, as a social media manager, as a content creator on this project, you don't even have to specify that it's this project. You can just say a social media brand. If you want to talk about gaining practical experience on how to do that, then this is a good way for you to do it for free. You don't have to pay for it. And it would be for a good reason, for the best possible reason. So you're all invited to that. All right, guys, I think that's a good place to end it for tonight. 2.5 hours in, and we still have a jewel of a conversation to have tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about numbers 6 through 10 of the Serene Rights of Manhood. The first 5 were heavy, life-changing. The second 5 are going to be just as life-changing. So thanks for hanging out with me, JV123, Harley. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the questions and comments. What time am I streaming tomorrow? It's a good question. Tomorrow is Saturday, right? Yeah. So I'll be up around 8 a.m. I'm usually up at like 7 a.m., but I'm not actually sitting at my computer and whatnot until 8 or 9. How about this? I'll send you a message, JV, before I go streaming. I'll send a message to all you guys who are my closest followers and friends. 123, JV, Harley. I'll send you guys all a message saying when I'm going live. But I would say it's going to be sometime in the morning for me, which is between 8 and 10 a.m. Central U.S. time. It's currently 6:30 p.m. here, if that gives you any kind of comparison, if you're outside of the U.S. So you're talking 14 hours from now. I highly recommend Glacial Cherry Gatorade Zero. It's thirst quenching. It's really, really good. You're 2 hours behind me. Where are you, JV? You can tell me in chat or DM if you want. I can't remember, but 2 hours behind me must be Pacific, right? 2 hours, but yeah, that's where I was. When I was in Portland, I was 2 hours behind. Portland, Oregon. So that's like west coast of the United States. Anyway, my dog is staring at me. He's looking at me like, so what's up with dinner? Like, are we going to have dinner? You're supposed to be the protector and provider. You guys want to see him? You can see him. I'll bring him live on camera. Hold on. He's sitting right here. I got to not knock over my green screen behind me here. Come here, little man. Come here. He's stretching. Hold on. Okay, come here. Big boy. This is Gilbert. Oh, it's my handsome boy. Look at that. Oh, he's a little chunky. I know. He's not as into fitness as I am, but this is the little man. This is Prince Gilbert. He is my whole life, my whole world. You guys heard the story earlier today. I literally put my life on the line for him. Defending him from this attack dog in the park who was going to kill him. He had him in his mouth. He was running away with him. If I didn't go after him, if I didn't step in, then there would be no cute little pug sitting here next to me. And my heart would have been broken. cannot. Sorry, I'm burping after drinking all that Gatorade. I can't imagine my heart truly would have been broken because he is kind of the band-aid of love and companionship that I have here on earth. I have Jesus' unconditional love. I feel it every night when I pray. I feel it when I go outside. I feel it when I am in my backyard and I'm just admiring all the blessings God has given me. I feel unconditional love every day of my life from Jesus. But physically speaking, having another life form in the home that you live in is important. And so that's what he does for me. And he teaches me how to be a good dad, how to be patient. He peed on the blanket the other day. Can you guys believe that? I'm like in the living room and I noticed that there's this weird smell. I'm sorry I'm talking about you, dude. He's looking a little embarrassed, but he's over 5 years old. He should not be having a problem peeing in the house. And he had an accident. I noticed, I was like, what is that smell? And I saw the corner of the blanket had been peed on. And the reason that this happened, it's not because he's disobedient. He's not because he's a bad dog. It's because I spent like 6 hours away from the house that day. And he's only used to ever having to hold it for like 4 hours. That's the longest he ever has to hold it for. So physically, his bladder, I mean, you know what it feels like to need to use the bathroom. Imagine getting to that point and then having to wait an additional 2 hours after having to use the bathroom. And nobody's helping you. You know, psychologically, you've been scolded. The last time you peed in the house, you know, it took you 6 months to learn not to do that. So you don't want to do it. You don't want to pee, but nobody's letting you out and your bladder's only so big. And so this is the maturity that having a dog teaches you, in that whose fault was it truly that day that he peed on the floor? Mine. It's my fault. I was gone from the house longer than he could hold it. I've only ever trained him to have to hold it for 4 hours. And he's a small dog. He's not a big dog. So if your response to the dog peeing on the blanket on the floor is going to be to yell at him and to pray to God you're not hitting him, but to lash out at him because you neglected him, that's a signal that you are not emotionally ready yet. You're not emotionally mature enough yet to care for another human being or even animal, because they have a limited intelligence and they have a limited ability to control themselves. You're the father. So you got to be ready for it. And I thought through all of that when it happened. I smelled the pee. I picked the blanket up. I held it to my nose. I was like, oh man, dude, you peed on the blanket? All right. Look, I know what happened. I was running errands. I went out to the gym. I did a happy hour. I don't mean an alcohol happy hour. I mean, my version of happy hour is I go to the gym and I sit in the parking lot for an entire hour in my car before I even walk into the gym. And I spend that time either reading the Bible or reading something else that is helpful in my pursuit of knowledge. Lately, it's been the Bible for the last several months because I wanted to go back and read the Bible from cover to cover. So that was my method of doing Bible study on a regular basis, was to turn my happy hour before the gym, where I'm sitting there drinking my pre-workout. I used to listen to music at the same time, but once I started reading, it's hard to read and listen to music. For me, it is. The music distracts me. It's easier if I want to spend that time reading, I turn off the music. But in the days before doing Bible study during my happy hour, I would spend that hour either watching YouTube debates about Christianity and about politics, or I would be doing the same thing on some other social media platform. So I talked this morning about self-investment and how those are all part of the 10 serene rights of manhood, that you have to invest in yourself. The hour that you spend in the gym is investing in your physical health. But this happy hour that I created beforehand, the reason I call it happy hour is because I do it after work, immediately afterwards. So it's like normally people get off work at 5 p.m. And what do they always go do? They go to happy hour. It's called happy hour because you get discount price on alcoholic beverages and appetizers. It's a social event. You're there drinking, you're there eating high calorie, high fat food, and you're just there to have fun and de-stress. That's what the normal happy hour is. But because of my devotion to the fitness lifestyle, I don't have room for alcohol. I don't regularly. I'm willing to drink occasionally, socially. Usually, I only end up drinking with my parents. On the weekend, we're hanging out by the pool and we have a couple drinks, and that's it. But when I prioritized lifting weights 4 or 5 days a week, and I prioritized making sure I don't have too many calories, and I prioritize the food that I eat being high in protein, well, suddenly I can't do the normal happy hours anymore. I don't get to go have the fun fruity cocktail and the potato skins and the loaded nachos and all that crap from the restaurant. Now, the good thing is you save a shitload of money when you replace my version of happy hour with the normie version of happy hour. But it's placed in the day during this time where you're transitioning from work mode to self-improvement mode. I just wrapped up the workday. I'm about to go into the gym and I'm about to concentrate on doing the right exercises with good form, with progressive overload, meaning that over time I'm adding weights because that's what you have to do to grow new muscle. I'm about to do all that. But before I do that, I got to get caffeinated because I just had a whole work day. So I'm sitting there, I'm having my pre-workout. That's my version of a cocktail. They're drinking some kind of alcoholic beverage at the bar. I'm drinking my own little designer cocktail, non-alcoholic version. Like today, I had a scoop of C4 pre-workout and a scoop of Hyde workout. One watermelon, one fruit punch. And it's fucking delicious. Like I got to say, it's a fruity, sweet beverage, just like a cocktail at happy hour, except it's 0 calories and there's no alcohol in it. And it's full of a bunch of caffeine and other supplements that are going to go help you have a good, productive workout. So that's the little happy hour I created in my life to cut out time specifically devoted to self-improvement before I go do even more self-improvement. That's how high level I've been able to build this life now. Like most people struggle just to even get to the gym at all, to then do an hour of reading beforehand or absorbing some kind of knowledge about how to debate controversial or tricky subjects, or become abreast on political and current events or spiritual matters. I'm putting self-growth time into my self-growth time. It's like fucking Inception. I'm like trying to grow before I grow so that I can grow. And I think anybody who doesn't yet have a wife and kids needs to be doing that. That's what you should be doing as a man. I talked this morning about the ratio of time you're spending on entertainment versus the time you're spending on self-growth. This is how I get to that crazy ratio of 4 or 5 hours a day for me are devoted to self-improvement. And if I'm lucky, I'll spend 1 hour on entertainment. And at this point, I'm so far down the self-improvement road that I honestly enjoy more sitting and reading or watching a debate or talking through these issues with you guys than I do spending an hour watching a fiction movie. I used the example earlier today about watching space troopers go and fight aliens, whatever fiction movie you want to watch, whatever, watching Stranger Things on Netflix, that's not self-improvement. Watching somebody stream a video game for 2 hours straight, watching somebody stream Diablo 4. And I say this because, I'm on the Twitch platform, which is dominated by people streaming video games. You got to understand that entertainment has a place in life, but it is nowhere near a priority. And so if you're spending more time on entertainment than you are on self-growth, you got to do a hard stop and recalculate how you're spending your time every day, because there's a lot of things you can choose from. It's not hard to figure out all these hours in the day that I'm spending on consuming Netflix and movies and video games and all this other entertainment crap. How can I repurpose that? Oh, 1, 2, 3. I got the perfect thing for you, brother. I'm so glad you said that, because I have literally the perfect thing for you. There's a series called The Chosen. I want you to watch it. And you're like, what? You just talked about not watching streaming series. No, no, no. The Chosen, so far they have 3 seasons, is the gospel. It is the story of Jesus Christ, but it's done at a Hollywood production level with top tier actors, top tier, it's not a cheaply made production. You're not going to know that you're watching a Christian production. It's not cheesy, it's not preachy. It is a historical depiction of the events in the Bible, specifically the New Testament, which is about Jesus's life. And I think we actually watched a clip of it. I think you were in that stream, if I remember correctly, where we pulled up the Beatitudes, that little 3-minute clip where Jesus talked about the different groups of people where if you're ever looking for God's presence, then to go to these groups of people. It's called the Beatitudes. It was part of his, yeah, that's the name of it, The Chosen. You can either find it on Amazon Prime, or if you don't have Amazon Prime, you can watch it for free, completely free on the Angel Studios website, or if you just search for Stream The Chosen in Google, their website will let you watch all 3 seasons for free, because that's how we roll as Christians. We care far more about getting the word out there than extracting every penny out of everybody that we can because we have this really good product. Look, we could charge for the life-saving and life-changing wisdom that is in the Bible. Like there are people who pay money to receive the wisdom of the Bible. The Chosen doesn't ask you to do that. It's completely free. It's crowd-funded. They funded tens of millions of dollars to produce this series to accurately depict what is in the Bible. It's not a fictionalized version. It's not a dramatized version. So yeah, we watched a couple of highlights from the episode about the Sermon on the Mount, and it's powerful stuff. I mean, there's a book called More Than a Carpenter that explains that one sermon that Jesus gave. He gave many sermons over his 33 years. Yeah, recommend any movie. But just that one sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, is his most famous one, which includes that 3-minute scene that we watched. The full text of that sermon, which you can read in the New Testament by literature historians, meaning people who study literature. They read Shakespeare, they read all the great authors throughout all of human history, across all religions, across all cultures. They say that the Sermon on the Mount is packed with so much meaning of what it means to be a human being and the definitions of good versus evil and the explanation of who God is. All the questions that people pretend are really complicated and so hard to answer. The Sermon on the Mount is the most concise, distilled answer to all of those questions. And it's just, I want to swear because that's how passionately I am, but swearing is a sin. We need to avoid doing that when we can. It is just extremely moving and powerful stuff. So I would love it. I would seriously love it if you guys went to the website for Angel Studios. That's who makes it. Or there's another website that is just for the show itself. Because Angel Studios, by the way, if you didn't know this, Angel Studios are the people who put out the movie Sound of Freedom. So if you've seen that trending over the last month, it came out on July 4th. The Sound of Freedom was put out there by Angel Studios, the same production studio who does The Chosen. They are the ones who wanted the world to know about the child trafficking rings that are very real, the pedophile rings in our government. Not just our government, but many governments throughout the world who are in on this and who enable it and who protect the pedophiles and the human traffickers. Angel Studios are the people who actually put the money on the table to say, we got to get this film into movie theaters. Yeah, it's a good movie. I watched it with my dad. And there's a lot of people who think that that's all conspiracy theory, that stuff is not, it's not as bad as you guys make it sound. But if you've seen the movie, you know that this stuff is based on true events. The numbers are horrifying, absolutely horrifying. The fact that America is the primary consumer of child pornography and human trafficking and the primary manufacturer of it. That means those people are living amongst us. We need to find them. We need to get them into jail or kill them. The fact that there were so many, by the way, if you didn't know this, Sound of Freedom, guess who originally had the distribution rights for that before Angel Studios bought it? Disney. Disney was the production studio who financed the original creation of it. But then when it came to actually publicizing it, they wouldn't do it. Why would Disney, a company who allegedly is all about the kids, well, we know they're about the kids, not protecting them. We know what they want with the kids. So it's very telling that Disney Studios shelved Sound of Freedom and would not publish it. And the producers, the creators, the filmers of The Chosen had to go and find another distributor to put up the money to get it into all these theaters. That was Angel Studios. So if you go to their website, you'll see all their other stuff, but you'll also see The Chosen. So you can watch it on their website, or you can watch it on the individual The Chosen website, or you can watch it on Amazon Prime if you have Amazon. That's what I recommend because it's the easiest to find and it's compatible with all the apps, you know, if you want to watch it on your Apple TV or whatever. But yeah. Oh boy. So yeah, report back when you guys go and watch the first episode, the first couple episodes. I hope that it compels you to then also go and read the actual words of the Bible so that you can fact check everything you're seeing on the screen is 100% exactly how it's written in the Bible. Because I don't want anybody to watch it and think that, like, well, you know, that was really moving and it was well written as if it's some kind of fiction. No, this is the shit that really happened. This is really what Jesus preached. This is what really happened to him. These were really the people who had him killed. These were really the miracles he performed. These were the disciples. The disciples are the people who went on to write the Bible. You'll learn this stuff as you get closer with your Christian faith and learning who Jesus is. The Bible is a collection of 66 books, and the Bible wasn't written by Jesus himself. The Bible was written by prophets, and the New Testament was written by Jesus's disciples and apostles, meaning the people who were there with him, who saw him performing the miracles, who saw him get arrested and persecuted and crucified, and who saw him resurrected, who saw him after he was brutally murdered. So you get to read their recounting of events. And when you accept that the Bible is not fiction, it's a historical document, it's people's journals that were preserved in book form, that's when the reality sets in that this Jesus Christ person, as a real human being, the things that happen to him matter just as much as if you were reading historical documentations about any other historical figure. The fact that these are real events, there's some serious implications to that, because the things that he said, once you accept that he's a real person, you look at the things he said. There's, in that book I mentioned, More Than a Carpenter, there's an argument that says, if Jesus was a real human being, and when you read the Bible, you read the things that he was preaching, such as, I'm the Son of God, and you believe the recounting of the miracles he performed, and you believe that when he said, I have the ability to save you from sin and grant you eternal life after you die, when you look at the collection of all the things that Jesus said he had the power to do and who he was, you have to come to some conclusion about that. You have to either say, I believe him, meaning he is genuinely the Lord, he is God, or you have to say that he's a freaking lunatic, right? He's actually somebody who is psychotic. Who else would proclaim themselves to be God? You actually have to have, I'm following the comments while I'm talking about this. So if you don't want to say that he is who he said he is, you only have two other options at that point. There's three total options. One is Jesus is who he said he was. Option number two is He wasn't lying, but he was a psychopath. He had delusions of grandeur. He thought that he was the Son of God, and he thought that he had the power to forgive sins. And he thought that he was the Messiah that was talked about in the Old Testament. And he thought that he could predict the events of the future, but he couldn't do any of those things. He only thought those things. So when he told his disciples these things, and he told the people watching his sermons these things, the thousands of people who saw these sermons, it's not that he was lying, it's just that he was a psychopath. And he was literally telling people, you have to follow me and follow what I'm saying, or else you're going to burn in hell for eternity. You have to turn away from Judaism, what you thought you understood about God, and all you other religions, you're all fake. All your other gods, they don't even exist. There's only one God. If he was out there putting this message and he was actually just psychotic, then he's not only psychotic, he has delusions of grandeur about himself, he's also evil, because he is actively taking people away from the whatever God you thought was real, from the Jewish God, from the pagan gods. You're saying that Jesus was out there. If you're saying you don't believe him and that he's actually just a psychopath, well, he's not only a psychopath, he's also evil, because he's telling people contradictory information about your eternal salvation. What could be more evil than that? Basically sending people to hell. Okay, so he's either telling the truth, or he's a psychopathic evil person, or he's a liar. That's the only other remaining option. It's called the Lord, the lunatic, or the liar. And this is how you can argue for Christian faith, the fact that Christianity has to be real, because the other options don't make sense. That third option would be, okay, he's not a psychopath. He doesn't actually see himself as God. He knows he's not God, and he's lying. That's the third option. We've ruled out he's not telling the truth. We've ruled out the fact that he thinks he's telling the truth, but he's actually not. The only other option is he's actively lying about the things he's saying. So then you have to say, does everything else we know about the story of Jesus Christ lead you to believe that this individual would be out there openly lying about who he is, about what he has the ability to do, about where he came from? Does the rest of his actions here on earth, when you look at the things he did, how did he spend his time? Did he spend his time going around doing dishonest things, lying, stealing? He never slept with a single woman. He never made a single dollar. He wasn't in pursuit of status. Every time somebody said, wow, you're amazing, he said, no, your God is amazing. The Father is amazing. I'm here on his behalf. So what would be the purpose of all of these lies if he's not trying to take credit for it as himself as a human being? So it's the Lord, lunatic, liar trilemma that is presented by accepting Jesus Christ as a real person. What does that mean? Because he said these things. He said very clearly. One other thing that he said, John 15, not John 15:18, it's John 21 something. He said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. That's the statement he made, saying there is no relationship with God possible if not through me. If you don't believe in me and the things that I'm saying, there is no possible relationship between you and God. So again, if he's lying about that, then he is essentially severing the possibility of knowing God from everybody. Does that sound like somebody who spent all of his time on earth doing charity for the poor, going to Mary Magdalene and casting demons out of her so that she wouldn't resort to prostitution and gambling to make a living? Would that be why he went around curing people's blindness and leprosy and lameness, meaning they couldn't walk? Would that be why he charitably fed 4,000 people on one occasion? On a second occasion, he fed 5,000 people? Does this sound like the pattern of behavior of a liar who never profiteered a single dollar, who didn't want to be known as a human being, as this healer? He wanted people to know God. He didn't want to be known himself. He wanted people to know God. That's who he said he was here on behalf of. And all the miracles are supposed to just be evidence for you to see and accept and believe that what he's saying is true, including his resurrection. When he predicts his own execution and predicts his own eventual resurrection, of which there is historical documentation, not from Christians, but from the Roman government, from the Greek government, from all of these other ancient civilizations, they also talk about Jesus Christ being crucified. So it's like these things are real historical things that happened. So as you guys watch The Chosen, I want you to be mindful of the fact that it's not a documentary. We can't make a documentary literally following something that happened 2,000 years ago happening live, right? But it is the translation of the gospel into modern times, digestible format. And so if you find it moving, if you find it compelling, then you would totally benefit from actually reading the text itself. Because all it does is it just goes into even further detail with even more historical examples, more evidence to clear up which of the three was it. Was he a lunatic? Was he a liar? Or is he Lord? So I saw your comment. I want to be able to debate people in depth about Christianity, but I'm not quite there yet. Hey, JV, I feel that self-consciousness still. And this is coming from somebody. I also saw the question 1, 2, 3. Have you read the whole Bible? If yes, have you read it non-canonical book? Have you read non-canonical books? So those are like the 7 other books that Catholicism incorporates into their faith. No, I haven't read the entire Bible cover to cover. I'm still working my way through the Old Testament. So there's 26 books in the New Testament. I read all of those. Then I went back and am now currently reading through the Old Testament. I finished the first book of Genesis, 50 chapters, by the way. It's not a short book. I finished that a couple of weeks ago. Maybe actually just been last week. And then I moved into Exodus, and I want to say 20 chapters into Exodus. That's where the 10 Commandments are handed down. I think chapter 20 or 21. So I got up to the point of the 10 Commandments in Exodus, and we're following along the story of Joseph. And I know a lot of the Old Testament just from the 4 years of attending sermons, watching Christian debates and whatnot. So it's kind of like I have the spoilers. I know what eventually happens. I know the story of David and Goliath. I know, not in great detail, the rest of the Old Testament. That's why I'm going back and reading it, because I want to be able to fully articulate everything. I want to have the entire arsenal of knowledge of Christian history, which that's like impossible. Nobody accumulates that much. It's a difficult thing, and you have to start getting into the minutia of the different versions of the Bible and whether or not the King James Version is the only authoritative source in modern times versus the NIV version and all the others that have come along since then. And you get into all of the infighting across denominations and whether or not Catholicism is the one and only true church. So it's like, as a Christian, you will mature over time on all of those different conversations, finding the right denomination, finding the right translation of the Bible, the version of the Bible, and becoming articulate in standing for your faith. When it comes to Christianity, there's so much to learn. Try Orthodox Study Bible. Right now I have one that is called the, I want to say it's like the Every Man's Bible. And it's a study Bible, so it has a lot of additional interpretation after every chapter and verse. So I find that very helpful. It's kind of like my partner in translating words that were written 2,000 years ago into modern English. Very helpful. So I only have 1 episode left, I think. 1.5 episodes left of the 3rd season of The Chosen. So I'm like trying to really slow roll it and not finish it too soon. They're filming season 4 right now, so I'm very excited about that. Right now, season 3 is looking like the Judas situation might come to a head. We all know Judas. Even if you're not familiar with Christianity, everybody knows Judas the betrayer, Judas Iscariot. So they've already introduced him as a character at this point in season 3. And they introduced the fact that he's handling the money for Jesus's church, for his ministry. And they've introduced the fact that Judas is a very good negotiator. He's good at negotiating deals. So we know the plot bomb is going to drop. We know he's going to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. We know that he's going to be so humiliated and ashamed of himself for doing so that he goes on to hang himself and be sent to hell permanently. So everything has a happy ending. We know that that's coming, but it's a unique experience when you watch the show, because it's like, you know that these events are coming. It's like watching Romeo and Juliet. You know at the end of them, they both die. But seeing the plot evolve to figure out, how did this snowball get to the point where the Jewish Pharisees are demanding that this person who's never committed a single crime in his life, who is the only person on earth without sin, demanding his head on a stick, technically his head on a cross. How did it get to that point? Like, it's so cool to watch. You get to hear from the different disciples, and you get to see the various miracles performed. You get to see the various prophecies fulfilled by Jesus being who he was. Anyway, I'm starting to repeat myself about the importance of the gospel, which you know I can do. So I'll wrap it up here. Thanks for hanging out, guys. 3 hours again. Fun session. Tomorrow I'll be back online and we'll do the second 5 of the Serene Rights of Manhood. There's a lot of important life advice coming when we pick up on that tomorrow. So I'll send you a message before I go live. I'll aim for somewhere around 9 or 10 a.m. my time. And I look forward to it. I hope you guys have a good night. Say a prayer for our friend I mentioned before, who lost his job because these atheist, satanic people think that cutting kids' genitals off is somehow morally acceptable, that lying to children and telling them that they're the other gender, that's acceptable, that people are getting fired from their jobs for this. Let's end with a prayer. I love that idea, JV. I'm happy to pray over us. Even Gilbert's sitting here underneath me, so he's in the prayer circle. So, gentlemen, let's start with this. Heavenly Father, thank you for this session tonight, where we're able to come together as men in a difficult time, men who are searching to know you as closely as we can and as faithfully as we can. We don't want to rest on our own interpretation or our own opinions of what the scripture says. We don't want to believe simply because some other Christian told us what to believe. We want to know you. We want to know what you want for us as individuals and what you want us to affect society, how you want us to do that. How can we bring people to knowing the truth? It's a very tall order living in this fallen world, but we understand the assignment. We understand that it's going to come with sacrifices. I mentioned John 15:18 almost every single session because we know that this is what the path is going to look like. John 15:18 says, this is Jesus speaking to his disciples. He reminded us back then, and he's reminded us, as recorded in the gospel for the last 2,000 years, that if the world hates you, know that it hated me first. For if you were of the world, they would love you as one of themselves. But you are not of the world, for I have taken you out of the world. I have chosen you out of the world, and that is why the world rejects you. So we know that just trying to bring people with you, to you, just trying to spread your word, that it is going to be difficult, and we're going to have to pay some sacrifices, and that's going to come in a lot of unexpected ways. It can hit your career, it can hit your family, it can hit your friends, it can hit your romantic life. We willingly make these sacrifices because we know that they're right. There's no other choice. We can't accept people openly spreading lies about the nature of humanity. that men are the same as women, that children can be fed these things without expecting severe repercussions. We can't accept that. We know that Jesus was the shepherd for the most vulnerable of the population. He came directly to the downtrodden, the heartbroken, the sick, the needy. And so that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be going out to the people who feel rejected, who feel like they don't have a voice. At this point in time in this history, we know that that's uniquely affecting white European people, that our culture is under attack. We don't believe that our culture is quote unquote superior. We don't believe that we're superior as human beings, but we do believe in the rights of human individuals being able to practice their own culture, assuming that that culture isn't harmful to other individuals. We think that you have given us a very clear directive and authority to be the peacemakers who try to squash the violence, to try to squash these conflicts, to try to squash the lies. You've given us a unique mission. You've given us through your gift of the Holy Spirit. When we accepted you into our hearts and we accept you as our Savior, in return, you've given us the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is what gives us the confidence and the courage to talk about these issues that we know we're going to be hated for. We know we're going to be targeted for, persecuted. And we can't even know how bad it's going to get. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop. We are not going to stop. If anything, we're going to try harder. So, Lord, we love you. We have our mission. We thank you for it. You've given us purpose. And we're not giving up because you didn't give up on us. John 3:16 reminds us, for the Lord so loved the world that he gave us his only begotten Son. You made the sacrifice that none of us can even hold a candle to. So we're willing to make whatever sacrifice we have to make for you. We love you, Lord. It's in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. There you go, guys. That's the best I can do. I'm still learning how to pray over others. I pray for myself and the people in my personal life constantly throughout the day, every single day. But praying in a group, praying in front of other people, it's not always easy. It's intimidating. The right words don't always come to you, and you can't take that as a sign that you somehow screwed up or that you're not a real Christian. You don't really know God. Not all that's nonsense. That's Satan whispering in your ear to try to distance you from prayer. He wants you to pray less. He wants you to be self-conscious about praying. He wants you to pray by yourself and not with other people. He wants you to be discouraged and afraid. We can't let him have that. So I appreciate it, JV. I appreciate it. 1, 2, 3. Amen. You guys have a great night. I'll see you again tomorrow. I'll shoot you a message before I get online. I'll aim for like 9 or 10 Central Time, my time. Talk to you guys tomorrow.